When you're on the rise, you can count on the four of us taking you down. Cause your good and evil never beat you. Would win the fight and then go out for pizzas. We are the crystal gems. We'll always save the day. And if you think we can't, we'll always find a way. That's why the people of this world believe in garnet, amethyst, and pearl and Steven. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Super Info Dump Brothers.
Wahoo!
I am here today with my friend Nathan and regular guest Joseph Holmes.
Hey!
Welcome, everybody. We are talking once again about Steven. Well, not really once again. First time if you are just a fan of this particular podcast. We're talking about Steven Universe in this podcast for the first time. Because if you moved from Rainbow Cupcake, you would have heard us talking about Steven Universe before. We talked about literally first season to the movie to the Steven Universe future, but I was still new at making podcasts. I don't think that episode holds up that well. First of all, I wanted to redo an actual proper episode covering Steven Universe, because Steven Universe is one of the most important cartoons in my life, and we'll get through that of why in a bit. But it's essentially for me, one of the best cartoons ever made. Rebecca Sugar is incredible. There's a lot of good cartoons in the past, but I'm saying modern cartoons is one of the best modern cartoons ever made, solely on the story and what it tries to do with presenting different types of trauma and very complex emotions translated into for children and for young adults. So for that alone, I think it's incredible. Other than that, is one of the main reasons why I got
connected
to Nathan in the first place. Because
really, I didn't know this.
So the reason what happened was I started listening to the Overthinkers podcast, and
with Joseph Holmes and Nathan Clarkson. Go listen to it now.
And I started hearing Steven Universe quotes on that podcast.
Oh my gosh!
And I was like, "Oh, they know Steven Universe." So when I came onto your podcast, I asked who edits the show, and you said Nathan Shear is our editor. So I was gosh. I need to be friends with that guy, not you guys.
This is the person who gets me. Yes.
I need to be friends with that guy, not you guys. So I was
get out here, you nerds! I need to talk to the actual nerd.
After I
valid.
After I was there, I texted. I don't know if it was in Messenger.
It's randomly messaging me randomly on Messenger. I'm just like, who is this, and why are they messaging me?
Who is this tool? Who does he think he is?
Who is this person that I don't know that is aware of my existence? No one should be aware of my existence.
Yes.
And I was like, "You're the editor of the Overthinkers podcast. I love you."
This is top 10 fears of Nathan's hair. It's he has told us over and over that if he becomes famous enough where that specific thing happens, he's never going to be on our show.
I'm out of here. I do not want to be perceived.
And yet,
I do not want to talk to the audience.
In this case, it was the beginning of a great and beautiful friendship, which makes me very happy. Anyway, go on.
Because he immediately led to talking about nerdy things like Steven Universe and Epitheta Race. And Epitheta Race. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll let it slide. This guy's cool. Yes. I'll allow it. But no one else, I tell you.
Yes.
I thought it was so funny because I've never done that before, So it was like well, actually, that's a lie. Like I did did do that like before with a very successful YouTuber right now. I made a podcast with her. She's super successful right now. Athena P. She's incredible in the cartoon space. She covers a lot of different cartoons. So that's awesome. That was awesome.
Right
on. So besides that, I did it with Nathan and turned out to be incredible too. And now I'm making a podcast with him as well. But yeah, but it was something I love when like something that you enjoy gets to connect you with someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that really, through Steven Universe, I made a lot of friends in high school. So that was also like a very formative experience for me because we enjoyed that so much. We would like make watch parties and stuff like that when the show was still coming out. So yeah. So that's what Steven Universe is for me. Now, Nathan, what is Steven Universe for you? Like, how did you come up with Steven Universe?
How did I come up with it and not Rebecca Sugar?
Yeah.
Well, you see, it was a dark and stormy night. I was drinking my hot cocoa while wearing my monocle, and I just thought to myself, by Jove, what if I made a show about lesbian space rocks and a magical boy?
What if the universe, but Steven?
Boom. Enough said. To the patent office. This will make $1 billion. Yes, I'll be rich. But in actuality, I think, yeah, I've always been a fan of cartoons ever since I was a kid. Never grew out of that. Joe can attest to that, as I often spend time showing him any and all cartoons I watched growing up that he did not watch, and we've also bonded on the cartoons that we watched together. We watched growing up, like Justice League and things like that. And so, Steven Universe, I just kind of stumbled upon it one day because, obviously, as I was aware of its existence as someone who follows the cartoon circuit, and yeah, I was just hooked right away by exactly what you were saying, right? It's just such a sweet and goofy and silly show, but also just deals with some very deep, dark, real life issues at the same time. And that's just kind of like my bread and butter when it comes to any sort of entertainment, really, because it feels more real to me when it's something that's both silly and goofy, but also not afraid to like sucker punch you in the gut with feels and emotions. And like we've talked about the sort of quote unquote genre before with Joe, talking about how much we like the concept of dark schmaltz, something that's very cheesy and schmaltzy, but also not afraid to get dark and real. And like Steven Universe is another good example of a medium that does that. And so I've loved how, like you, Ray, it's bonded me with so many people. I remember having so many, sitting down with my roommates so many times, watching through the show as it was airing for the first time, seeing all those hype moments together, like Steven and Amethyst fusing for the first time. Oh man, me and my roommates were cheering like it was the Super Bowl when that happened. So I just love how it's brought, like, how it gave me more insight into myself and how much I related to both Steven and other characters on the show. But like you, Ray, I just love how much it brought me together with other people as well. And I love continuing to talk about it. I love continuing to share with people about it, like I just got done doing with Joe, since we just got done sitting down watching through the show together and me showing it to him for the first time, and he was enjoying it as well. And I just love being able to not only see someone else react to it and like and see them enjoying it, but also getting more enjoyment and appreciation by talking with someone as they're watching it for the first time, as they're reacting to it. Like there was so much great insight Joe had as he was reacting to it that I was like, oh wow, I never thought about this before. I never realized how this connected to that before. Oh, this is great. And so like I think for me, a great joy I have is not just connecting with other people about the things I enjoy, but seeing through that connection how the thing I enjoy is able to connect to so many other things about life as well. Like just seeing all these connections happen just because a couple of us got together and just started watching or talking about our favorite things together, and seeing how that little thing just has this spider net web that able can connect with everything else we love in life as well. So yeah, I enjoy Steven because it's just kind of one dot in this big vast web of connected dots of things I enjoy about life.
So beautiful. And lastly, Joseph, Nathan just said it, but like, what was your feeling, like your like feeling experience watching the show, like as because you were a new viewer, you did not experience the hiatus or the release,
the Steven bombs,
you didn't experience like how like this hype of things, but I guess you kind of did because you were watching it little by little, but it's like in different chunks. So I guess it kind of has that similar experience. But like, how did you feel as you watched the show? Like, what are your thoughts on like kind of like the basis?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Again, like we're all nerds here, but
What? Nah.
but like I definitely am cartoon adjacent in my nerddom. The cartoon space is not my native tongue. Nathan
Shame
is
on
my
you.
guide in terms of where I'm going to ignore that. In terms of this kind of weird, vast land, and so I've often said, I think on this podcast too, that Nathan is my cartoon dealer. He'll always
Yes.
he'll always be like, so we want to watch another cartoon. It's like, well, I've got, pulls out his his leather jacket with all his watches.
Look at my wares.
Exactly. And I remember him, he was talking about Steven Universe, and what I remember first is Nathan talking about it as a show he really loved and how he was constantly talking about it and making references to it and saying, hey, this thing that we're talking about right now, well, by gosh, they were just dealing with that on Steven Universe. And, we're having a conversation about fandoms. And he said, well, let me tell you about the Steven Universe fandom.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I said, man, I think that maybe Sonic the Hedgehog fandom is the most toxic fandom. And he says, well, let me talk to you about the Steven Universe fandom. And so I knew Steven Universe from Nathan Scher talking about it as an important part of his life. And so one of my first experiences of Steven Universe was one of the first cartoons that Nathan was introducing to me that wasn't introducing to me primarily as, here's something I think you would enjoy, but here's an important part of my life that I think that you would really enjoy because we've had conversations about this. And I think that it would be really cool if these part of our conversations were not just things I was explaining to you, but that you would be able to get to experience yourself and we could talk about it on that basis. So basically,
I just wanted to give Joe context for how crazy my mind is. That's all.
Exactly.
There's a sense of vulnerability as well when you're sharing something that it's like, I not only think I think this makes a lot of like my thought processes like are in this show. Like every time I see something or think about something, I'm like, that show, and like I understand Nathan's way of thinking because in the Overthinkers podcast, like every time, like that's why like one of the things like I told him like that was so scary for me at the beginning of watching that podcast is like, was this made for me? Because like every single time you guys would say a word or say something like before Nathan would edit the
association
thing in,
and then
like,
exactly the thing.
Exactly. I was like, holy crap, what? Like, you're reading my mind. But like it's so crazy because we talk about it a lot where Nathan and I have such different experiences when it comes to like how we were raised and also how we operate, like and what decisions we make. But we consumed a lot of the similar things and we took away a lot of similar things from those medias. So I find it so interesting, and I always say it, we are similar but different, and it's like so interesting to me. But continue, Joseph. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's actually a really key point. I'm going to get to this. I want to get to this later as we talk more in depth about Steven Universe specifically. Is that it actually didn't just help me understand Nathan better. It actually helped me understand a lot of my peers and people. I'm going to kind of say zillennials because I think that Steven Universe kind of crosses this kind of barrier of the common experiences and imagination of millennials and Zoomers. So again, because it's like kind of made from a millennial-ish perspective, but it's made for a Zoomer audience, and so it's that inflection point very specifically of zillennial imagination, and so helped me.
I was watching it with my brother, and we were both enjoying it at the same time. So it's like he's my younger brother, so it's like it's definitely what you just said. Like Makes sense.
So it's really helped me understand other people, like my peers and younger, the imagination that they inhabit. So that was really helpful for me in that respect. But moving back to my subjective linear experience watching Steven Universe, I remember the first time I watched Steven Universe, basically throughout maybe the first half of the first season, almost every episode, I would say, why? Why is this happening? It was when you're talking about like being a part of a different culture and experiencing a different culture for the first time, a different just kind of a way of imagining the world. I remember with Nathan, like, right from the beginning, the beginning I kind of got, because it's like, oh, okay, you have a theme song, it opens, and it's kind of doing a self-aware, heightened version of an 80s theme song for an adventure show. So it's, again, it's like, oh, we're the Care Bears. It's like, oh, okay, we're the Crystal Gems. We always save the day. And I'm Steven Universe. They're okay. I get this. I understand this framework. It's self-aware, but it is a framework that I recognize. And then it would be, why is the gem in his belly button? What, like, I get the gem being the power thing, but like usually it's on your hand or it's in a sword or it's like, why is it in a belly button? And I would just always turn to Nathan and say, why is this thing happening in this? And he would say, why not? Or because. I remember very specifically one of my first things, and this just shows you kind of like, where I start coming from with this. It was like, I think the second or third episode where Steven randomly breaks into song, and it's a musical now. And I remember saying to Nathan, why is it a musical now? And he said, why not be a musical now? I said, because the first two episodes didn't have wasn't a musical. And, when Phineas and Ferb have music, but they have music every episode. So it makes sense. But this didn't have music, and now it does. So why is that a thing? It's because they decided to do it. And so there is this gradual acclimation I had to do with Steven Universe.
Yeah.
To its particular language, its particular imagination of the world, like what makes sense in the context of the world. It's humor. It's the level, the kind of reality that it's going for, and again, it wasn't something that I was particularly experienced in, that combination of reality. It's very similar to how, going from Justice League to Teen Titans, was a bit of a culture like shock for me in terms of understanding what kind of reality you're working with, what kind, in a superhero show. This was kind of another one of those things for me. But as I got acclimated to Steven Universe, I got to say, okay, what's the internal logic of this world and this spirit, this conversation, this sense of fun, this sense of heart and mystery and tragedy that they are dealing with? I really got like really, really into it as a show that is, I would say, unique in the way that it attempts to, do something that we've seen before, which is, heroic kid goes on adventures to save the world with magical friends. We've seen that everywhere, from the Chronicles of Narnia to
pretty much any Saturday morning cartoon.
Right, pretty much any Saturday, to Sam Witwicky and Transformers. Again, it's like it straddles this line because Steven Universe is superpowered himself, but he still takes the role of the human sidekick character within this framework. But then what it's attempting to do with that would deal with extremely complex emotions and problems and trauma, but do it within a framework that you're talking to maybe both kids and adults, or you're primarily talking to kids and talking at the very least, talking in the language of Saturday morning cartoon kid goes on adventures with magical aliens to save the world. And so that's something I really never seen before. And I can talk about what I think is the significance of that. I think it's extremely, again, a timeless thing, but extremely generationally specific. And I want to talk about that later, but that's, again, my experience of it. And again, now having gone basically over several like years watching it with Nathan, I'm watching it and being like, okay, I'm seeing how this is reflective of my life, and it's making me ask questions of my life and try to wrestle with things with the language of Steven Universe. It's given me a language with which to talk about my life, whether let's say, I agree with all of its handling of its frameworks or not. It's given me a language with which, whether in agreement or opposition to it, or neither, it's not a binary, to feel and imagine and discuss these things.
That's beautiful, Joseph. Beautiful. Like,
what was really beautiful was just seeing all of his flustered reactions when he was questioning everything that was happening. It was a gold mine of Joseph Holmes' reactions.
One of the things we did, this became a ritual, is I would say, hold on, pause. And they would say, yes. Okay, go on. Yeah. And I would say, did they just, why? What's it? And Nathan's like, I understand. Yes. Take all the time you need, Joseph.
We can continue the episode when you're done processing. Take your time.
Joseph, has anybody told you that you should be a writer?
Fortunately, my editors agree that I should keep doing it for the time being. Otherwise, my income is going to drop really fast.
But beautiful words, and I think like just one thing that just is going to bother me the entire thing, and if I don't say it. The gem is in the belly button because it's kind of like an umbilical cord because it connects it to the mom. Like, it's like there.
Which is brilliant.
And
it's
also, I think,
honestly, also, that's something that Nathan could have said to me when we were watching it. But he didn't.
It was more fun just seeing you react like you did. But also, I think there's also a metaphorical representation. Because I think between Steven's gem placement and the Crystal Gems placements, it's all kind of representative of like their main personality. Where it's like Garnet in the hands, Pearl in the mind, Amethyst kind of more in the heart, and Steven's in the belly, which is more representative like of like the soul in some cultures.
Let us begin with actually diving into the show.
Steven Universe lives in Beach City with the crystal gems, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. He struggles to manifest the powers of the Rose Quartz gem in his belly button, inherited from his late mother, Rose Quartz. He hangs out with his human friend, Connie, his dad, Greg, and fights feral, corrupted gem monsters. Steven learns to summon his shield, developing Healing Spit, and discovers the magical dimensions of Rose's room and Lion. Steven and Connie fuse for the very first time into Savani while dancing on the beach and alone together. The homeworld threat. Steven frees Lapis Lazuli from a magical mirror. She fixes her cracked gem, and flies back to space, warning Steven that homeworld has changed. Soon after, Steven discovers Peridot using the ancient galaxy warpad to check on Earth. The climax. Lapis is captured and brought back to Earth as a prisoner alongside Peridot and a brutal veteran Quartz soldier named Jasper. Jasper poofs the gems and imprisons them on their green hand ship. On the ship, Steven escapes and discovers Garnet is a fusion of two smaller gems, Ruby and Sapphire. Garnet defeats Jasper, the ship crashes, and Lapis drags Jasper into the ocean by forcefully fusing with her into Malachite to keep her trapped.
So that's season 1. That's season 1. Like, I really want to know, like, as we finish each season, like, what Joseph thought about the season. Like, what, and like, the reveals.
Yeah.
It's been a while, Joseph. How much do you remember?
So I was thinking, I was going back through these, and I was thinking, and a lot of times it's hard for me to kind of remember each individual episodes so much as like events that I thought were really meaningful to me. And sometimes I'm going to conflate certain seasons. But I say again, like some of my strongest memories of these seasons are, again, like the first episode where it's like, oh, this is a show that it's all about him trying to get like the ice cream that he wants. Like that's the episode, what this is, And then, okay, this is his first time going on a mission, and man, he messes it up really badly. And it's like, okay, they're doing like a slow arc here, which is interesting. I think that when they were first developing his relationship with his dad, I was really thinking like, oh, this is really interesting because he's kind of got like not a useless dad, but not a kind of useful dad in the way that typically you have, young men sort of need in their lives. And so you kind of have this dad who is he lives out of his, van, and he's kind of an old rocker, and he's not really able to teach things to Steven that normally Steven would be looking from his dad from. And so he's looking from his, crystal gem figures, but you still have his dad, wanting to have a relationship with him and impart stuff to him. And again, there's a lot of really human stuff here that I was like, wow, like these stories, they're doing these kind of adventures, but they're still doing these very human stories connected to it that are very complex relationships, and a very complex relationship with his mom and what that looked like. I also really enjoyed the episodes with kind of Connie, and where he was kind of like, because you have Steven again, he's the human sidekick character of these adventure stories, but he's trying to kind of come into himself as the hero of the story. And often episodes with Connie, because she's kind of like, oh, okay, she would be the love interest. And in order to have a love interest, you have to be the hero. And you kind of watch him sort of struggle with that. I think that, again, so like those are kind of things that I really remember kind of being struck by and saying, okay, this is interesting. I like where this story is going. I like who these characters are and becoming. When when it started to get with, it's like, okay, you've got an arc here. You've got Homeworld. You've got the villains. You got this. I was really struck by, I think we'll talk about this more later, who the villains are in this series. Mm-hmm. Because I talked about the fact that this is a very zillennial show. And you've got this very timeless idea of, human kid with powers, going and fighting villains with magic friends. But it's not like, let's say, Chronicles of Narnia or even Lord of the Rings is, where the villains are the barbarian hordes who need to be defeated. Mm-hmm. And what needs to be restored is kind of a kingdom. Very much the villains of this show are two things. They are anyone who wants to tell other people how to live, and they are internalized trauma. And what I think is really, and so when we create Homeworld, what you establish Homeworld as is this villainous empire that wants to give everybody a very rigid, defined role and impose that on everyone and colonize all planets to do that for them. And I think that that's really interesting that Steven Universe, it was doing that as that's emerging as kind of like, okay, this is what the villain is. And then the other villain is Steven Universe has trauma because of his mom, and all these other characters kind of have trauma from what all these things happening. And Steven as a character is built around saying, how do we heal from this? Again, very specifically, his superpowers become healing powers. Yeah. He has a shield. He doesn't have a sword. He has defensive and healing properties. And, I remember thinking, well, this is interesting. What direction they're going to go with this? How are they going to expand it from here? Because what they're established with someone like Garnet, what they're establishing is not the Garnet we know is actually a fusion. What you're saying is that then the core of who her character is defying what the rulers told her to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really there's a reason that sort of this very zillennial kind of culture here is because pretty much through our entire growing up period, every single villain of our recent history and our even direct experience has been the authoritarians. It's whether it's the Nazis in all the movies that we watched in the Indiana Jones movies, whether it's any sort of shadow of communism, whether it's then growing up with the religious zealots of the what was it, the Islamists of 9/11, or whether it's more locally like the Westboro Baptist Church, people, it's like it's all of the villains kind of in our imagination are the authoritarians. And again, it's it's slightly different. Let's say again, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, or even Harry Potter, where these are all stories about a good kingdom that's being invaded and needs to be and the good kingdom needs to be reestablished. Literally, the last Lord of the Rings movie book is called Return of the King. But Steven Universe is setting up this idea that it's authoritarian people in general that are the problem, and what is good is a much more kind of individualistic Western pluralism, and self-expression. And it's, no, I need to be who I feel I want to be and around the people who I want to be, and I need to, and that's what flourishing life looks like. And not only that, but I need to the solutions to this. I think this is a very specifically millennial and Gen Z thing, because we have mostly been shielded from the actual effects of like war. Most of our problems are, how do we deal with sort of the emotional and relational trauma of some of these kinds of things? And so Steven actually starts to attack this problem as, how do we heal these people? How do we heal these relationships? Again, I don't know what season the whole why don't we talk to each other comes from, but
that's a little later. But that is definitely something I would reference a lot talking with you, even before you watch the show.
Exactly. No, that's the thing. It's like a lot of these references. It's like, oh, okay, I finally get where they come from. And so I that's where, again, when I think where this season it first ended, I was like, oh, that's where this show is going. I remember feeling a little bit like, I don't know if they can pull this off. Because, and we can talk about this a bit more later, but trying to reduce kind of all of the problems in the world to authoritarianism and therapy is very limited. It's a very limited kind of way to understand the world. And this end of the first season was sort of seeming like it was kind of like it's that all the way up and all the way down. That's kind of what it's creating. It's like, okay, well, I don't know how they'll be able to pull that off in a show that's trying to be as complex as it's trying to be, and apparently is going on for like 4 more seasons. So that was kind of my reaction, was saying, oh, this is what this show is trying to be. I don't know if it can pull this off.
For me, I started watching this show when I was 15. So I was Steven's age. So a lot of the experiences Steven is going through, I related to Steven. And I focused more in the essentially the drama of the relationships. So, I can agree with you about the authoritarian stuff. But for me, when I saw that season, I wasn't even thinking about any of that yet. All I was thinking about was more the focus on the family dynamics, and not only and it's interesting that you describe his dad the way you did, because that framework comes to me later in life. Because when I watched the show for the first time, I was like, man, if I had a dad like that, that'd be great. Like a dad who lets me just be myself and not overly tell me what to do, what to wear, what should I do with my life. Someone who just lets me be me. And I think that plays a lot into what you're saying, that it's a very generational thing, because that is what I was feeling. Like, I was completely relating with the message of, hey, I don't want to, I enjoy this, sense of, it's like kind of like this escapism, right? Of funny because one of the episodes, but like its sense of escapism, with the sense of like, oh, he's living like this cool fantasy life, right? Like, I wish I had that. Like that would be awesome. Like, so like that was kind of like more my experience was when I was 15. I was like very much that. Also, what I started to notice as I watched that season was, man, is he meant to be is this meant to be is he meant to be a representation of a messiah? Because of the healing, because of and I connected it that way when season 1 started coming out. I was like, he has this like Jesus quality, like not like completely, but like,
yeah, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but they're definitely
a chosen one. You know, he chosen one character. Yeah,
it's not a one-to-one, but I started thinking that as I went through it, and as the show goes on, it started solidifying it to me. At least the first the first show really does to me, and it's fascinating. And let's continue. Nathan, do you want to say anything about season 1?
Let's see. I enjoy season 1 because it was the most low-key of all the seasons.
Yeah.
Like, plot definitely does happen, but I feel like the plot doesn't really start to happen until, like, you start getting to the finale. Whereas what I think I enjoy a lot about the show is how slice of life-y it felt.
yes.
And I enjoyed a lot about that. I also enjoyed how season 1, I think compared to all the others, is easily like the most weirdest of the season because it has like some of the most out there random plots.
Yeah.
Like you can definitely sense the Adventure Time influence with some of the episodes and also the animation. Like you may not notice it now, Joe, but like if you ever decide to go back and like watch season 1 episode and compare it to like later episodes, like the animation can also just be very weird and very wonky, and just like kind of just adds to this feeling of like, okay, yeah, they're getting their legs still. Like this is their like first foray. They're like still trying to figure out who they are. But I think I really just loved how like balls to the wall the show got first season.
And we got time travel in the first season, right?
Yeah, time travel.
It could be very creative. And again, I think that you guys are hitting on this. Again, the first season was very much like, okay, this is like the world. These are the individual episodes. This is the fun. It's, you know, the fun of doing this. And there was a very clear message that, you know, particularly the first season, it gets more complex later on, but like, what's the real issue is relationship. Relationship repair is whatever crazy adventure was going on. Like the monsters of the week didn't really matter. What mattered was, are, you know, Steven and the Crystal Gems going to open up about their feelings and reconcile? Yes. And again, I think this is very interesting because, you know, we have lived in such relative safety for so long that, you know, again, like the 70s and 80s, we stopped the serial killer problem. You know, and like but what we have lost is, you know, we've more and more become lost relationship stability. And I think that's, I mean, there's like a recognition within even the very first episode of Steven Universe that like what matters in this episode is that Steven apologizes, or they learn to like, you know, say, hey, this is how we can repair this bond that was broken.
Pearl and Amethyst get along and finally fuse in order to save Steven because they learned how to be harmonious with each other, stuff like that.
Exactly.
All I wanted to see you turn into a giant woman. Giant woman. He's the one who gets to see a giant woman. But I think the idea, like one of the episodes that really pop out for me in my head in season 1 is that episode where they are training him, and he goes like to the training grounds, and then he like falls off. Like there's no real danger ever. Like there wasn't real danger at all. So like when he gets to the finish line, he pretends like that he was excited and all this stuff. Like and that was so interesting to me for him to it was so different because I was so used to characters like instead of just forgiving and understanding, he like I was used to more like the Disney Channel or the stuff or like of going like, why did you do that? Like, why did you like lie to me? Like, no, I thought how interesting the response was from him of analyzing the situation, realizing that because they're like his moms, basically. Like that's the idea, right? So it's
first time moms, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to deal with the kid. They're like scrambling, flailing, trying to figure this out. And so they're obviously making a lot of missteps.
What really got to me from that was like, oh, this kid has grown up in an environment where he feels like he doesn't only need to live up to the expectation of his mom, but also he needs to take care of everyone else, of everyone else's feelings. And I resonated with that so much because that's what I grew up in. Like, I grew up having to like adjust my feelings and adjust what I believed so that my parents would have an easier time. And that was on me. It was not on them. It was not on them. It was the situation I grew up in, was that my parents were missionaries. My parents like gave up everything, went to a different country, and raised me in that country, but they were helping people. And I was a part of it. Like, I was part of helping people. Like, that's why I'm telling you, Steven Universe, I relate so much to Steven Universe because I feel so connected to the situation, because I felt when I was growing up, I felt like I was also saving people. I was helping people. I was feeding the hungry, like doing all these like things, and my parents were teaching me to be like this kind person who gave everything up for everyone else. And I had to adjust my feelings sometimes because I wanted to be with my dad. I wanted to be with my mom. But sometimes I couldn't. Sometimes they were too busy with church things. Sometimes they were too busy with having to help someone else. So like I'm not saying like I was neglected in any way. My parents are very loving. But what I'm saying is that I adapted to not wanting to cause a lot of problems, but instead coming up with solutions. And that created also a lot of resentment in me and a lot of pent-up emotions that I didn't know how to deal with. And as well, like, I was growing up with ADHD and autism without even knowing it. So those things were like really I was really good at masking. I was really good at not expressing those emotions because I literally like didn't most of the time. I was like just happy, and everybody knew me as this happy, nice, and everybody would say it. Everybody would say it at church. Everybody would say it everywhere. And my parents would always say that they were so proud that, and they were sad and proud that I always was there to help, with the mission and all this stuff. So, like, I grew up in that. And that moment really like spoke to me, and as the show goes along, like, again, I keep like resonating and connecting to his experience from like a real world perspective. But yeah, like I find it fascinating.
Yeah,
and that was again the thing the show did is they would take these experiences that many of us would have, and that we were kind of becoming aware of our own feelings and emotions, and they would be able to say, yeah, this is an experience, and again, not like you say, go with the more overt tropes of like, okay, let's make these, have the characters yell at each other, and it's like, no, this very complicated emotion that a lot of people have felt of, I'm going to pretend I'm okay with this, and then tell a story around dealing with that. That's something, and then put to the forefront these complex emotions that we as sort of millennials are learning to kind of put to the forefront of our own language and own lives is what makes this such a very generational specific show, as well as kind of doing this timeless thing. Again, I can tell you, again, as a preacher's kid, one of the things I learned was how to tell a story about what was going on in my life that would cause people to stop asking too many more questions and think they got to know me more than they really did. And that's a skill I developed as a kid, because again, people want to get to know the pastor and his family. And so you have to, as a kid, give them enough that they feel like that they know you, but not so much that they actually get to know you in a way that could be actually damaging to your family. And again, like I said, nothing my parents did wrong. It's just it's just a reality of being a minor celebrity child, but the thing is, what it did to me as I got older is it made it easy for me to not have people get to know me, or not get to know the darkest, actually cared about me or loved me, or would if they got to know the actual parts of me, or I could actually hide the sinful parts of myself that needed to have light shined on them. So again, I got coping mechanism things that were that were a detriment to me actually developing true intimacy and accountability. And again, this kind of psychoanalyzing of myself is not something that the average person was doing, a few generations ago to this degree. But we are doing it now. And so Steven Universe was able to, again, as I live in this self-analytical space of recognizing and reckoning with our own problems growing up in this way. And again, already in the first season, it's doing that in an episodic way and in an episode by episode way, but it's already doing that.
Yep, I'd say from start to finish, it seems like the show is all about just emotional catharsis. Not to say that there aren't physical threats and there isn't physical catharsis. Like, it's just that, like the comparison you were giving, Joe, it's not about like restoring a good kingdom or beating this pure evil thing. It's just more like, okay, but who are you on the inside? Like, what are you doing? What are you up to? What do you want? And then there's kind of like a kingdom restoration that happens inside you when you take the time to unpack those emotions and make those connections and realize, oh, okay, this is what wholeness looks like. Like, not just like external wholeness by like physically defeating the villain or like doing these things, but an internal wholeness of like restoring these broken parts of me or like connecting these things that seem otherwise inconnectable. And that's what this show is like is all about doing. And I think what I appreciate kind of like a low-key swerve this show does by the time you see the ending of the first season is you think, oh, well, now the villains are coming in. Now we have our pure evil bad guys. Now we have our threat. Now we have our villains that like we can just like easily defeat without any question, not worry about it. And then the show goes on, as we'll see as we keep talking about the rest of it. Oh no, these villains also get to have the emotional catharsis. We're also going to explore their emotions and realize there's more to life than just getting rid of a problem. Like, there's more nuances, there's more exploration to be had, and there's a deeper catharsis to be had by trying to explore that.
That's why I disagree a little bit with you, Joseph, in the reading of the authoritarian society not wanting you to be yourself. I feel it more as a society. I think it is a representation of the previous generation that decided to keep all their emotions inside and essentially like didn't deal with them, and
the boomers that never got therapy.
In the process, they created us, basically. And we now have to deal not only with our own emotions, but the ones that they held back and kind of like expose little by little as we still grow with them. So it's like this sense of like, I think the fact of like it's trying to be more like, hey, maybe you should learn a little bit from this generation on how to deal with your emotions and see how they are affecting you in affecting your relationships in more ways than one. So although I do understand where the idea of like, oh, it needs this idea as well of like specifically of like, oh, you can't be this specific way or stuff like that comes from, but like I think to me as well, I see it more as that like an oppression on feelings and relationships more than a specific way you need to live your life, because technically the gems are born with specific functions. All of them have specific functions, and they still keep their functions throughout the entirety of the series. Like, they don't stop being that thing that they are, because that's part of them. It's that also they can choose to do other things aside from the things they were made to do. So like there's no this rigidness. What you did mention the rigidness, but like I think like there's a more that there's a more rich thing when you're able to not only find what you want to do, but also how you like find essentially like what's the word I'm looking for? Find a way to connect to other people in a healthier way. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, essentially, this might be an oversimplification, but I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
No, yeah. Well, we can continue this conversation as we go through more of the episode this season.
Yeah.
But I don't think that our views of this that we're describing are incompatible or in conflict. I agree with you that that's going on. Yeah.
Okay. Season 2. Peridot's redemption and the cluster. The hunt. With the ship destroyed, Peridot is stranded on Earth. The crystal gems spend months searching for her while trying to locate malachite in the ocean. Pearl and Garnet experience a major falling out after Pearl manipulates Fusions to spend more time with Garnet, which takes episodes to heal. The cluster revealed. The gems finally capture a weaponless, limbless Peridot. To bargain for her safety, Peridot reveals that Homeworld planted the cluster, a massive artificial incubation of millions of shattered gem pieces deep inside the Earth's core, which will destroy the planet when it emerges. Working together, Steven convinces the gems to team up with Peridot. They construct a drill in Greg's barn to tunnel down to the core. Living in Steven's bathroom, Peridot experiences Earth culture, builds a deep bond with Steven, and learns to respect crystal gems. The defection. Peridot steals a homeworld communicator to contact her leader, Yellow Diamond. When Yellow Diamond coldly commands that the Earth and the cluster be let to rot, Peridot insults her to her face and formally declares herself a crystal gem.
You Claude!
Yes.
The face that Yellow Diamonds make is so funny. Like, so
this is a part where I really started to fall in love with Peridot as a character, which I was not expecting to like her so much. But I think there's something about her journey in particular, about coming to Earth, having all of her structures and foundations just kind of completely undone, and then just learning how to build them all up from scratch as she makes these connections, as she develops her own special interests, as she just learns that there's more to life than just her way of seeing things, and how that made her such a stronger person as a result.
Yeah. Joseph, what are your thoughts on that season?
Yeah. Well, again, I think that this season was where the show started to be about the redemption of the villains. And that's what I think was, very interesting. Because again, the first season is all about the reconciling of relationships and reconciling relationships with yourself and your own feelings and your own trauma, and reconciliation with other, your friends and the people you love. And then you've got the villains, and the villains come in, and they again are presented as, again, the authoritarian villains, as the oncoming, the empire, the colonialism, the Nazi, the space Nazis, they're presented that way. And then you have the villain who is, it's not the ultimate villain, but again, it's kind of like in Star Wars, where it's like, you have Darth Vader, but you also have above him, you have the Emperor. Like, there's this, but like one of the main villains that you're fighting in the first season, actually turns out to be somebody that can be redeemed. And this became something that became central in the Steven Universe show, which is that the villains have their own trauma. And they're actually, the reason that they're doing this is because they have trauma, just like you have trauma. And that becomes a basis for saying, well, why don't we actually, the same way that I'm working through my trauma, I can help you work through your trauma. There's a joke about how during I think the period of 2010s to early 2020s, mid 2020s, every movie was about the fantasy that parents would apologize to their children. Whether it's the Turning Red or
Encanto,
How to Train Your Dragon, Encanto, or even Everything Everywhere All at Once. And there again was this because Zillennial culture became very therapy focused. We started to understand our enemies as okay, well, they're suffering from their trauma, which again, there's good sides and bad sides to this. Can talk a little bit about the bad sides to this later, but this is extremely Zillennial thing to say. Actually, the bad guys just need a hug too. and but it becomes something that becomes a deep part of Steven's spirit, as I want to reconcile the enemies as well as friends. And again, I'm making fun of it a little bit, calling it kind of Zillennial stuff. It's also extremely Christian, and it's something we don't see in a lot of things, which is hey, love your enemies, and us being enemies of God, and him wanting the project of Christianity being reconciling us to God and then to each other, redeeming enemies. For now, the secular version of that, I hesitate to use the word secular, but the secular version of that, of course, is how everyone in America loves Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he himself said he was a very strong Christian, but he was also a civil rights activist. And he said, the double victory is turning your enemies into friends. And so I don't think I've seen a show that exemplifies that more as its spirit, as Steven Universe does. And this is as Steven is becoming, this is something that people are going to actually make jokes about, that this is just who Steven is. But this is the season that Steven starts to become that person that he says, I don't want to defeat my enemies. I want to make them my friends. And that is really, again, you said to Nathan, this is where the show starts to really come into its own about what it's trying to say. And it partly does that through Peridot, where the person who is, again, what's her most famous thing is to say, you Claude, and wanting to rigidly enforce how people are supposed to be. You're not supposed to fuse. You're not supposed to think for yourself. You're not supposed to do these things. And transforming it into, this is a character trait that can be benign and even positive, not just a picture of cartoon villainy. So that's, again, I think, sort of as I'm growing to kind of watch this show and say, okay, this is a show that's different from what I thought it was going to be, and I'm interested in seeing where it's going next with this.
And this is the moment where, to me, season 2 was the moment where I was like, yeah, he's like a messiah. He's bringing a new idea of redemption, of trying to create relationships from your enemies. Because Rose wanted was the idea of let's escape, let's try to find our place, our home, and let's fight the enemy, right? And let's keep the enemy away. Let's fight the enemy. Let's find our refuge. This is where we live.
Reconciliation, you stay on that side, I stay on this side, and we can't reconcile. We'll just get rid of each other. No room for reconciliation.
But Steven comes with a new idea, with a new covenant of going hey, let's love each other, or let's try to find a way to understand each other. And again, like the healing, like the redeeming of a villain, I started like connecting things as like, this is interesting because I've never seen a show, a cartoon from Hollywood, from like depict like Christian values like this for a long time. Like, it's been a while, because like you had it like back in the day.
Like we said this when you and I were talking about this back in Rainbow Cupcake. It's the most Christian, non-Christian show we've arguably ever personally seen.
Yes, because it's like, there are a lot of things that you go like, well, a Christian would not be okay with that. But like but there's a lot of Christian values in there. And I think it's so funny to me because the average Christian person would not watch the show because of the other things, right? What Nathan joked about, the lesbian
the lesbian space rocks, yes.
But I think that is I find that very, very interesting because, first of all, they don't like, it's not a thing in your face all the time, and they're aliens, like and their planet is only full of women. It's the same thing with Wonder Woman to me. Like I get like Wonder Woman, like, because it's like she's on an island full of women. Like, who else are you gonna fall in love with? Like that, like, it just makes sense. Anyways, like, I don't know. I find the logic, but it's like I've met people from the LGBTQ community that. And this is not everyone, because there was a huge LGBTQ fan base, but I've met some that say it's not real representation because they are from a planet full of women, so it's not real representation. It's like, I find that very interesting.
Yes, the ever elusive real representation conversation.
Yeah. But I find that very funny. But besides that, there's a lot of Christian values in here that are being taught to children, and I think that's wonderful. I thought that was beautiful, and I was like, this is great. And I think it's like for teens. I don't think, I started watching the show when I was 15. My brother was a wee younger. He was 6 years younger than me, so it's like, it was still good for him as well. Like, he enjoyed it. I remember the episode of the fusion, when we discovered that Ruby and Sapphire are a fusion. My brother like looks at me like when they spin around each other. It was like, and it just looks at me and I go like, they're good friends. It's like they're best friends, you know?
And they were roommates.
they're best friends.
The two become one flesh.
Yeah, I was like, I had to do that because I didn't want him to tell my parents.
They are super best friends.
They're best friends. They're best friends. Anyways, I think like during this time was when I started kind of like making those connections even more. I was like, okay, yeah, this is interesting. You can continue, Nathan.
No, I completely. Oh, it's like as far as season 2 goes, no, I think it pretty much sums up my thoughts about it. I think we said everything I could be said about season 2. So let's move on to season 3. Dark History of the War, season 3. Stopping the cluster. Stephen and Peridot drill to the Earth's core, unable to destroy the cluster. Stephen connects with the shards telepathically and helps them bubble themselves into a peaceful slumber. The return of Jasper. Malachite finally unfuses in an ocean battle. Lapis is freed and chooses to live at the barn with Peridot. Jasper escapes, completely unhinged, and begins forcefully fusing with corrupted Earth monsters to create a rogue army. The tragedy of Bismuth. Stephen accidentally unbubbles Bismuth, an original crystal gem blacksmith. Bismuth shows Stephen her forge and explains that Rose's sword was designed to only poof a gem, never shatter it. However, Bismuth reveals her new weapon, the Breaking Point, made specifically to shatter homeworld gems. When Stephen refuses to use it, Bismuth attacks him, forcing Stephen to poof and rebubble her. The Pink Diamond Rumor. Jasper corners the gems. Before she is defeated by Steven and Amethyst's new fusion, Smoky Quartz, a corrupting Jasper bitterly screams that Rose Quartz brutally shattered Pink Diamond. The finale. Steven travels to the moon base with a squad of tracking rubies. He learns about Pink Diamond's ancient Earth colony before a decompression event sucks him out into the vacuum of space, where he floats until the gems rescue him.
Now, Joseph, one of the things Nathan told me when you were watching the show for the first time was, I can't wait to see the illusion of his mother being shattered. So this is where it starts. What do you think about the...
So I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
What?
Say that again.
I missed some of that.
Oh, okay. So one of the first things that Nathan told me when you were watching the show is that he told me when you started watching, it's like, I can't wait for his perception of his mom to get completely shattered. So I kind of wanted to know your thoughts on this, because this is the first time I ever saw it. I don't know if I'm pretty sure it probably has been done before, but it's like a regression of a character, because it's like you start you see a backwards it is a backwards character arc, basically, because you start learning more about their past as you
an anti-redemption arc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a backwards act for the character, and like you do get like the illusion of his mother being this good person begins to get shattered.
Yeah. So what's interesting for me is watching the show, and again, this is something that reminds me of why I really was impressed by this show in many respects, is because I remember having certain things happen. And I don't remember if this was the moment, but I would keep having things happen where, Rose would be this idealized character, which again, the idealized, mom or dad character who's dead, is a fairly common trope, as is the whole, I idealized this person and they turn out to be, evil. That's also a trope that's fairly common done. I mean, Darth Vader is, one of the most, obvious examples of this. And, Frozen did this thing, and it's like, I turned out it's secretly evil. Marvel does this all the time. My mentor was secretly evil, things like that. What I like where they ended up with Rose much more than those. Again, I love how the way they handle Rose is she's not evil. She's not as good as I thought she was. What I started to see as I went on the show is there would be things where I would say, she doesn't seem like she's as good as they think she is. You would have hints of flashbacks to the past, and she would kind of just have people do whatever she wanted and get them to do whatever they wanted in ways that were hurtful to them. And I would say, I don't know, she seems like kind of selfish and kind of a jerk to me, but I wasn't sure if the show knew it. And what I started to see, I think maybe third season, was, I think the show does know it. And that really impressed me, because they weren't being obnoxious about it. And again, it wasn't stuff that was like, secret evil the whole time. It was like, she's just being very selfish here. And you're watching the characters start to say, hey, maybe it's okay for me to be hurt by something she did. And that's, again, not a hero-villain thing. That's just a normal relationship thing with someone you love, when you start to say, maybe it's okay for me to love someone and be okay to voice the fact that they did something that hurts me. And again, for me, again, one of the defining episodes of this was the Pearl Dad episode, where Steven gets them to talk through their garbage together. And And they say it's just like, you just couldn't say no to her. They both say something, and I was like,
She does whatever she wanted.
She does whatever she wanted. That's it. She does whatever she wanted. And I was like, that's, I think, one of the moments where I said, oh, the show does know what's going on here. And that was probably one of the moments where, again, with the second season, I was kind of like, okay, this show is becoming something, and it's deciding what it's in. This is interesting. I think that that moment with the show where they said she does whatever she wanted, I said, I think that this is a really good show. I have never seen a show. I've rarely seen a show, let's say, whether kids or adults, that, tracked that experience, first of all, of having someone you love and allowing yourself to say that they hurt you, but also then just, dealing with that in such a complex way and an affirming way to say that's okay to say, and that's a complicated thing to thread that line so subtly was,
and more when you're also like,
to me.
More when also you're mourning their death as well. Like they're gone. So it's like it's fascinating as well. Like that's another layer to that.
Yeah,
where it's like,
it's one of the most impressive character arcs I've seen. I think it's a better character arc than Zuko from The Last Airbender, which was which was a redemption arc, but the arc of the character saying, I can allow myself to think differently about this person and hold these things in my hand of how I rethink how I think about a person I love. Again, this show starts with, we talked about this before, with the whole Lapis and Jasper, I think it is, where it's like they fuse and they're essentially in this abusive relationship. And it's like, okay, now we can separate and we can, and it's toxic, and we can say like, okay, how do I reclaim myself after I think about, what this relationship was and the complex feelings about it. Again, and that's a little easier for us because, okay, this is an abusive relationship. We can put a label on it. But it's already doing these things about how do I deal with my complicated emotions about somebody that I love or used to love. And now with Steven's arc and with his mom, they're doing that much more writ large. And I think ultimately it ends up being one of the best versions of that I've ever seen on TV, children or adults. Which is one of the reasons I think that Steven Universe is such a great show, is that arc of that relationship. And this season, this period is where I started to realize that I wasn't smarter than this show in this regard, that they knew what they were doing.
Yes, this is why I find it so frustrating when people say that Rebecca Sugar was pulling things out of her butt. Because I've met a lot of people that do. And I find it, I'm like, have you rewatched the show? Because if you rewatch it, because a lot of people started getting mad at that because they've never seen it before. But I was growing with the show. Like, when I tell you this, Joseph, I was growing with the show. I mean, when we get to that, what you just said, realizing that somebody you love can also hurt you and also hurt you, and accepting the fact that you can still love them, but admitting the fact that it did hurt you, what they said, what they did. I went through that with my family. So it's like, so I was experiencing that as the show was coming out with those things. So it's like, I think that the show is such a great experience growing up with it. Like, that's why I am going to show this show to my kids when they hit 14. When they turn 14, I'm going to play the first episode, and I'm going to, like, slowly feed them the seasons as they get older. Because I think they're really formative in like the development of people, and the show knows it, which is the most incredible thing that I've ever seen, is a show actually growing with their audience in a very specific way. Of like, this is what you're going through right now in this specific age. Here you go. Here are the tools to deal with that. I've never seen that in a show before. like ever in anything. Like in that way, no. Like yeah, like you have like children's shows that like teach you like other things, but it's like but this specific show was going like these are the feelings that you are going through right now in this specific age. These are the tools to deal with those feelings and how you can go through through them in a healthier way. Which and the funny thing to me is what Nathan talked about, which you mentioned, which is how toxic the fandom was. Because to me, the toxic fandom was the one that was not growing up with the show. Was the adults and young adults who were watching the show from the beginning that started getting mad because they didn't understand what the show was doing. Some of them were thinking that the show was only meant for representation. A lot of people thought that. Others were in the camp of like, this is a cool space, like anime-esque story. I'm gonna watch this, right? And they were getting upset with the reveal of Rose Quartz and all this stuff. So it's like, I found a lot of people who dropped out of the show when the big reveal of who Rose Quartz was came up. Because they had a bunch of theories, like they were making so many theories of who Rose Quartz, who Pink Diamond was, and the notion of what happens later on in the show. By the way, spoilers, we always forget to do that.
So we're talking about a whole season arc, series by season. We're gonna do spoilers.
Yeah.
So, but I like this idea of people starting to get upset with the show, and I saw a very specific group that was getting upset with the show, and it was people that were not growing up with it. And I found that really interesting. So yeah, we can continue if nobody has anything else to say.
I just think I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think the only other thing I can say and add is I think going back to the point of like how some people just thought like Rebecca Sugar was like making this up as you go along. I feel like you see how much intentionality was this from the very beginning of the show, with all the way she added breadcrumbs, not just like when it comes to people like character arcs, but also like talking about like the big reveal. Like you see these breadcrumbs even happening here. Yep. And like you were saying, Joseph, like the more you learn about Rose Quartz, the more you start to question, wait a minute, she's not only is she like not that great a person, but she's doing stuff that kind of seems to directly contradict herself, like the whole thing with Bismuth, where it's like she started this war to defeat the diamonds. Why is she getting rid of a weapon that can actually defeat the diamonds? Like actually get rid of them once and for all. Like what's up with that? Like is she being merciful? Because she doesn't seem that type of a person when you learn more about her.
She started a war. That's not super merciful.
Yeah, exactly. And then like there's a whole detail about like they make a specific detail of how her sword cannot destroy or kill a gem, which becomes a big plot point later because that also becomes a point of discrepancy when they're like, oh well, like she killed a Pink Diamond because of this sword, where it's like, wait, no, she didn't, because the show actually said that earlier on. So like there's some discrepancies going on here, and they were like, and the Crewniverse was very clear. It's like add these breadcrumbs throughout the show. It's like you knew they planned this all out from the very beginning and were very intentional with how they put it all together. And so yeah, I very much give the show kudos for that. And I think another thing, talking about how this is at the point of the story where you really start to see them embrace the tensions of accepting the fact that a person that you love and mourning is not perfect. I think they also all at the same time, as Steven starts to learn that, they really start to ramp up the stakes against him to like see how hard that can be. Because not only is he realizing his mom's not that great a person, but you see just how much of the ramifications of all her mistakes really start to affect and harm him directly. Because this has one of the episodes where he gets sent into space and nearly gets essentially stabbed to death by one of the rubies, like which is one of the most traumatic moments he's had in the show up until this point. So he's really starting to learn firsthand, this is because of my mom. All these people are after me because my mom did these things. How am I supposed to think about my mom now? Like, she did do these good things, but she's actively done these bad things to me as well, essentially. How do I reconcile it too? Like, how do I face that? And like the show doesn't try to like tie it up with a neat little bow right away. They're acknowledging this is going to be a hard process for Steven.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's interesting, I don't know, again, I don't always know what things happen in what season, but one of the things I started to see in this show that I liked was, what does Steven's worldview look like when it's challenged?
Yeah.
Because he was like, I want to redeem everyone. It's like essentially like season 2 that started that. And then it's like, what happens when people won't be redeemed? When people don't want to become friends, when they stick with it. And I liked seeing that tension of, like, this is when I go back to saying, I don't know if this show can pull this off, what it seems to be trying to do, what it's trying to set up, because I don't know the breadth of 5 seasons of this, if this kind of tug of war can be maintained. And this was one of the times where I realized, okay, they have some modicum of idea of how to show the varieties of the way that this philosophy that Steven has can work itself out in the world. Because again, not everybody that you try to reconcile with reconciles with you. And so what does Steven's worldview look like when it doesn't always, quote unquote, work? And so you start to see some of the villains who he tries to redeem, and then they don't get redeemed. And what does Steven do with that? Well, the answer is, it's still worth trying. It's like, okay, that's another shade of that. And I liked them having that acknowledgement of, what does Steven's worldview look like when it doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that as well as Steven begins to grow, we begin to see some cynicism from him. And I think it begins here. Like, it really begins in this season, where we see some cynicism start to grow in Steven as his world becomes bigger, and as, like Nathan said, as he realizes that he's dealing with problems that his mom specifically caused. So I think that we see seeds of cynicism start to grow in someone who is so hyper positive, and someone who is very much always trying to do the right thing, starting to grow. So yeah, we can continue.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, season 4, the Human Zoo and Steven's sacrifice, grief and guilt. Steven deals with
I have opinions on the Human Zoo.
Steven deals with massive emotional trauma, feeling crushed by the weight of his mother's alleged murder of Pink Diamond and his guilt over bubbling Bismuth and Jasper.
Steven deals with emotional trauma. Is like this. That's the entire show.
Emotional damage. The zoo. Steven and the Gems travel to a space station built by Pink Diamond to rescue Greg, who is kidnapped by Blue Diamond. Steven discovers Blue Diamond is paralyzed by thousands of years of grief over Pink, while Yellow Diamond wants to destroy Earth to erase the memory. They rescue Greg and escape. Abductions. Homeworld sends Aquamarine and a Topaz fusion to Earth to kidnap specific humans for the zoo, based on a list Steven casually gave Peridot seasons ago. The Crystal Gems are completely outmatched by Aquamarine's technology. With Connie and his friends held hostage on Aquamarine's ship, Steven makes a choice. Knowing Bismuth told him Rose's sword couldn't shatter a gem, but knowing the galaxy believes Rose did anyway, he steps forward. He declares that he is Rose Quartz, accepts blame for shattering Pink Diamond, and surrenders to save his friends, leaving Connie devastated on the beach. That's season 4.
Yeah,
so talking about like all of the trauma Steven's dealing with, while also growing and becoming more cynical, like it's a mixed bag, because you see him really start to become one of the Crystal Gems as he starts to like really take a hold of his powers, as he starts to take on more responsibility, as he's like goes from being the safe little kid sidekick who's like off in the corner while his stronger friends like deal with all the problems. Now he's directly in the line of fire of all these physical threats, and seeing the weight of that responsibility, and that like adds more stress, adds more cynicism, but also leads to his more Messiah syndrome essentially, where he's like, oh, well, if this is the danger I'm facing, just imagine what everyone else is going to face. Well, I had to step in the line of fire now, even more so, in order to protect my friends and loved ones, even if it means sacrificing myself or taking blame for something I didn't do, because I can't let my friends face more of the same pain that I'm just now starting to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the sacrifice of the Messiah moment of the show, basically, of like, I'm gonna face the crime of essentially like all the sins of the past. I am gonna take them upon myself, and I'm gonna face it head on. So
I will pay the penalty for sins I did not commit.
The sins of the
Like,
father or mother.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so like again, you really see the parallel here, and at this point, you also see and again, I'm so glad I can talk to this with Christian people. Because I've tried so hard with other people who are not Christian, and they go like, "What?" But I'm like, it's all over. Like, how can you not see it? But I find it like interesting because in this, I think it is in between season 3 and 4. There is an episode where they go back to the past, and Steven is getting told the story of when he's a baby, and the gems are still getting used to him and all this stuff, and they do a scene that ends the episode, because this was supposed to be the Christmas special, because there's no Christmas special, but this is like the Christmas special, and you the last scene is the van. Greg with putting on the little thing, looking like Mary with the baby, and then Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl being the 3 wise men with the gifts, and I was like, it's right there. There's no denial that this is a parallel to a Messiah kind of story. There's nobody, he's meant to be Jesus basically. So it's it makes you
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where this is a sad example of the decline of media literacy, because it's clearly, our culture has been extremely defined, that our idea of what a savior looks like is highly influenced by Jesus' example. And you don't have to be a Christian to acknowledge that. You just have to have basic media literacy to acknowledge that. Yeah. That the idea that not only conquering, but also self-sacrificing from the idea of reconciling with your enemies, all these things that are just tied up in Christianity that came from Jesus, having such a profound effect on the Western imagination. Again, you can't, without Superman, you can't understand Dune, because Dune is a specific subversion of Messiah myths, where, okay, he's got a miraculous birth, he's got all these things, but he could still be evil, in the ways that those move on us. And so it's sad to see people not be able to understand they are setting Stephen up as a space Messiah that this world needs. And he comes from a miraculous birth, he comes from that, and he's a child of 2 worlds, that's how they see what the world needs, is a Messiah figure.
And as the show continues, the imagery keeps coming, and we just gotta get over there, because I am so hyped to finish it, because it's so fascinating to me to talk about that. But yeah, Nathan, do you need to say anything about the season?
Let's see. I think, like we said, there's a lot of good in Stephen growing up and accepting this role as a Messiah and stepping up more to save people. And I think with everything else, I think it's also worth acknowledge. We've acknowledged the good, and I think there's also the bad, in the sense that and we see this more as the series goes on, of how this is the beginning of Stephen kind of shouldering a bit too much on himself and kind of shutting people out as an excuse. Using his messiahness as an excuse to kind of shut people out, and sort of he basically he has this messiah complex, he has this main character syndrome, and then obviously it has benefits here, because they, like you were just saying, Joe, these people need a messiah, but also as the show goes on, and especially as we'll see in future stuff, literally future, that's not a very healthy mindset to have. But you just start to see those seeds beginning to plant here, with the tension between him and Connie over their disagreement about how to handle a situation, and how when he does eventually come back, she's not happy that he decided to sacrifice himself without even accepting help from her, in the process to begin with. Yep. So, it's like
he's
it's fascinating to
accepting
see
his
it.
roles as a messiah, and he gets the messiah complex along with it.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's,
Which is what I think it's
play messiah
so
games, get messiah problems.
it's so fascinating because it is interesting because he's meant to be this parallel to that, but he's also a parallel to a Christian. Like it really like,
Yes.
and when it comes to future, you really see the parallel to Christianity, like to what like you really do, like when you get there. But it's like, but yeah. So we could continue with the next season.
Yes. All right. Season 5. The Ultimate Truth and the Diamond Empire. The Trial. On Homeworld, Steven stands trial before Blue and Yellow Diamond. His Zircon defense attorney uses the logic of Rosa's sword to point out the conspiracy. How could a standard Quartz soldier pass Pink Diamond's guards and shatter her with the sword not capable of shattering? Steven escapes with a human named Lars, who dies during the escape and is resurrected by Steven's tears, turning him pink and gaining magical hair portal as a result. Steven uses Lars' hair to return to Earth. A single pale rose. Seeking answers, Steven confronts Pearl. Pearl sends Steven into the physical layers of her gemstone memories, where Steven witnesses the truth. Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond. Pink loved Earth and staged her own assassination with Pearl's help so she could permanently live as a Quartz Web rebel. The invasion. Steven reveals the truth to the traumatized crystal gems. Amidst the emotional fallout, Blue and Yellow Diamond launch a devastating attack on Earth. During the battle, Steven manifests Pink Diamond's shield. The Diamonds recognize it and realize Steven is their lost sister. The finale. Change your mind. To heal the corrupted gems, Steven and the Diamonds travel back to Homeworld to face the supreme matriarch, White Diamond. White is a cold, abusive perfectionist who brainwashes the other gems and literally pulls Steven's gemstone out of his body to force Pink Diamond out. Instead, the gem manifests as a pure energy clone of Steven, proving Pink is gone and Steven is his own person. White undergoes an existential crisis upon realizing she is flawed, allowing Steven to convince her to dismantle the caste system and return to Earth successfully to heal all the corrupted gems. And there you go.
I saw this finale with my first ex. We were watch partying it together. The moment this happened, we erupted in screams. It's like Nathan said, like it is like the Super Bowl level of like sports, like kind of like that, but it's like literally like insane. Like insane. It was such a moment of, because the prevalent theory was before that rose quartz
tell me
somehow.
what the prevalent theory was. Yeah, like I'm interested in this.
So one of the big ones was that Rose had not killed Diamond, but she had turned Pink Diamond into something else. There were two theories. She was either poofed and inside of Lion on the chest. Second one is the fact that it was Lion himself who was Pink Diamond. That she turned Pink Diamond into Lion, basically. This moment was insane. And again, it's the moment that the Steven Universe fandom fractured forever on. There were the people who kept watching after this, and the people who went like, Steven Universe is stupid, and I wasted all my time. And that reveal, just
really?
that episode. After that, nobody else wanted to watch anything else. And then all the other ones that were like, this is incredible. Rebecca Sugar is like the best writer ever in reality. And that was like basically, and the
two extremes.
Like exactly, it was like the two extremes. And what I was thinking was, oh my gosh, my theory's right. He is the Messiah. He is
the literal Son of God.
Yes, he is. Because like the Diamonds had been set up for a long time as like the gods, right? Because if you look at the backgrounds of every single thing of like season 1 really sets up the entire universe as the fact that even the thing I have on back in the back of me, like this universe's religion is the Diamonds. Like this universe's religion is set on the fact that the homeworld invaded made a colony on Earth a long time ago before humans even were existed, and humans evolved with the discoveries of these diamond temples, like shrines to the diamonds and all this stuff. They were setting up the dollar. On the back of the dollar, there's a diamond instead of the pyramid with the eye of God and providence. There's the diamond. So it's like really sets up that these are the gods of this universe, basically, for the humans. So whether people believe in them or not, that's a different story, because I think most people in Beach City are kind of like, oh, weird things happen all the time, but it's like they never like acknowledge like these things as like deities or anything like that. But they do they do understand that magic and all this like wacky things are real, right? So except for some people, like some people are atheists, because like Connie's parents are kind of atheists. When Steven meets Connie's parents,
they a conspiracy theorist in town who is like, it's like, what do you need a conspiracy theorist for? Like, it's all everyone knows.
Yeah.
And he instantly calls out the whole diamond thing from the very beginning.
Yeah, so like I just think it's funny. I think for him it's like the crazy, like, yeah, because he has like the snake theory and all that other stuff, like snake people and all that stuff. But like I do think it's so fascinating, and so for the confirmation that my theory was right was incredible. Of like I didn't know pink diamond rose quartz was pink diamond, but I do know that some people were making those theories back in the day. Some, like a very minority group of people, were saying that rose quartz was probably pink diamond. I wasn't one of them. I didn't think that until the event happens, and I was like, okay, my theory was right about Steven. Like, not about, like, her, but about Steven, the fact that Steven is this messiah figure. I've been, like, building this up all this time, and I'm like, yeah, he is. Like, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I've never seen that before done in this way, this particular way. So it's like, it's really cool because you have, again, you have them resurrect someone from the dead. That was like this Lazarus moment, basically. So it's like, there is
Lazarus.
Like, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
that's pretty good.
Yeah. No, but Joseph, like, it is there. Like, it is like very like blatant that it is the Jesus story told for a younger generation, in this generation, with a more like screw the authority and more feelings based, basically. But it's basically that. It's basically
which you can argue is kind of a lot of Jesus' testimony anyway, just undoing the authority of the Pharisees and just making a lot of his testimonies about internal struggles.
Yes, actually, that is true as well. So it's like, it fits. It literally fits, because it like he comes to disrupt this like really rigid religious perspective and introduces a new way of living. Because, and the coolest thing to me is that and we haven't gotten there, but in the movie we see that they're building a new kingdom, the new homeworld. Like, it's like taking the like destroying the old homeworld because like it's not doing the right thing, and building the new one to like it's so great. I like. Anyways.
And like you mentioned before, I think when we talked about this before, Ray, where like Rebecca Sugar isn't explicitly Christian, but I think you said like she had like a Hebraic teaching upbringing. So like you can tell like even like she wasn't trying full ham into like being super purposeful about this. You can also tell it doesn't come out of a vacuum. Like this, like she didn't make it up out of nowhere. There is some pattern to this.
She has a Christ haunted imagination.
Yeah.
She was raised with Jewish theology. Right. So she wasn't she's not Jewish, but her father raised her with Jewish theology. And there's a lot of, the Messiah stuff like coming in and doing stuff. So I think that she's very much like inspired by it, and she's also inspired by Christianity. And I really think that when I watched Change Your Mind, I found that in a way she was trying to, because with the family, with familiar, why is this so familiar, like something I used to be, like all this stuff. When he meets the yellow diamond, blue diamond, and white diamond, it feels like trying to reconcile with, in a way, with God. When Change Your Mind, when he sings Change Your Mind, like I find like there's a duality there of like wanting to bring a new perspective on God, basically, like essentially. So it's like it is very much this modern parable of the Jesus story. So like it is fascinating to me.
I mean, I'm sure it's no accident, like, that the final, like, confrontation with White Diamond literally happens in the head of her giant robot. And, like, even, like, if before that, like, when he's able to finally reconcile with Pink Diamond and Blue Diamond, or sorry, Blue Diamond and Yellow Diamond, when they finally realize this is Pink, it's when Steven, like, has this astral projection moment, and is able to, like, go into, like, astral projection to their feelings, as manifested as, like, these, like, little avatars on their heads, and it's like just touches them and it's like, hey, no, it's really me, just like change your perspective and you'll see it's actually me, like just trust me.
Joseph, what's your thoughts on this season? Sorry.
No, so two parts to this. One is this brings to the climax of the Rose Quartz story, and for me, I was really impressed with the twist. Again, having a good twist that you've been doing for 5 seasons is hard to do. Almost impossible. And for it to feel like what a good twist needs to be, which is, I never expected this, but looking back, it was the only way it could have been, is very hard to do. And the show did it because, A, it fits with everything that we've been growing to learn about, Rose, that she is not an evil person, but a profoundly, unintentionally selfish person, because that's all that she ever knew, but who was good-naturedly selfish in the sense that when she saw people who needed help, she wanted to help them in the only ways that she knew how to do. And yet, she still was only ever surrounded essentially by sycophants. So she never really learned to not be selfish with them because nobody ever told her that she was being selfish. And so this was the ultimate expression of that, where I am going to traumatize a bunch of people in order to do something that I think is a greater good, and not realize the way I'm going to hurt people. And Steven understanding that for himself and then communicating that to other people, this reconciliation of the universe through an acknowledgement of the shared cosmic and personal trauma that they all experienced, was the perfect way for that, everything that they've been setting up, to end. Again, the personal trauma and the personal attempts at reconciliation, and the cosmic ones as well. This is also the moment where I saw, again, as its finale show, where I saw the most cracks I felt opening up in the Steven universe. Because and Nathan got, a chance to sort of watch me as my development, where I started to say, okay, I see the thesis statement of the show and I see problems with it. Because it is a show that's all about, reconciling with ourselves and our own history and our own trauma, and therefore very much it's only going to happen on my terms. You talked about the show, that song, Change Your Mind.
Yes.
The show only terms. On the terms of his values, his perspective, his thing. And again, it's always this difficulty because, well, what do you expect? It's a kids show, but it's also a kids show that's like subsuming all of our, complex emotions of our upbringing into it. And the thing is,
Yeah.
I've seen, again, the good of what we've talked about of the Zillennial generation, of like, oh, we're going to actually unpack and work through our garbage. And we're going to, do that with each other. And then we're going to try to do that with our parents and stuff like that. But we've also seen the ancillary, which is, the rise in family estrangement. That's far more severe than's ever happened before because, and this is what they sort of social scientists have found, is that the definition has changed in millennials and Gen Z, where they will only ever consider themselves loved if their parents affirm them, however they define that. Again, whether you define that in terms of sexuality, whether you define that in terms of career path or whatever, it's like the kids have changed so that we want reconciliation. It's only ever going to happen on our terms. And I think that the Steven Universe does encourage that kind of narrowing of the imagination around what reconciliation can look like in its story. Say that exactly as a criticism of the show, because I partly see the show as a snapshot of the imagination of this generation, and that's what the imagination of this generation is. In the same way that I look at something, a show like How I Met Your Mother, that is, it's, way it treats like Barney's character, who is like a serial sexual predator, as not evil but pathetic. That's a snapshot of a pre-Me Too kind of perspective on a Barney character. So it's hard to call it like I have a criticism of it. And also its obsession with hookup culture as the standard for how you find someone, even though all the science says that is a terrible idea. Don't ever do that as your way of finding the person. But I don't, like I said, but this is a snapshot of the show. Mm-hmm. But I do think one of the problems with, you talked about how beneficial it was for you to grow up with a show that gave you a language for talking about your experiences. You also had the benefit of having extremely strong Christian parents that you had a strong relationship with that gave you supplemental stories to talk about it with. And I think for a lot of the people who didn't have supplemental stories to talk about this with, that grew up with Steven Universe telling them from kid to adulthood how to deal with their experiences, again, that's why men and women don't talk to each other anymore. It's why, family estrangement, right? It's why so many of our problems is because the only way we can imagine reconciliation is on our terms, and our terms are algorithmically narrowing to, to affirming extremely narrow views of what we are and who I am. That is where and this is the season where I saw, this is the limits of what the show is doing.
Mm-hmm. In a way, you can almost say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like you can almost say like the problem is kind of like what you see, what that Jesus acknowledges when he's talking about his parables to his disciples, where he acknowledges, yeah, a lot of people are going to hear these parables and not understand because they don't have that relationship with me like you guys do. You guys have that relationship with me, so you can understand these parables. You see where it's coming from. Like you understand the extra layers to this beyond what's just on the surface. But the problem with a lot of people out there that are fans of this show, they're not Christians like us. They don't have that relationship with God. They don't have that extra knowledge to really see the deeper layer of what's going on here. They just see the surface level, and because they can only see at the surface level, that's just going to lead to more problems because they don't have the full picture, just part of it, and it's still a good part of the picture, but not the complete one.
And thank you, Joseph. I'm very happy that we had this conversation. We're having this conversation because you made me see why I dislike the final moments of Change Your Mind. I've always felt this very uneasy feeling with the song Change Your Mind. When I change your mind, I hate that song because It is one of the worst songs in the entirety of the show. Because to me, it goes against what just happened. I don't know why, but it always bothered me. Because like the way it played out in Homeworld, was it was very like you were saying, it's like this fantasy of like parents apologizing, all this stuff. But at the same time, I saw it more when I was watching it, at least, and I was a little bit older at this point. I think I was 18. When I watched this finale, I was like 18, around that age. And I thought that it was strange because, and I think it has to do with what you're talking about of me being like my Christian upbringing, because to me the whole reason why the turning the bad guys, the not like the space Nazis into which technically weren't, because apparently, like according to the Crewniverse and Rebecca Sher, they never like actually killed any living like thinking organism in any planet, basically.
Sure.
A thing that like Earth would have been like the first one, is what she says. So yeah, but
they were literal white supremacists.
I think. Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that the way I see the resolution is, or the way I saw it was, oh, this is really smart, because the fact that Steven is related to these people, they're his aunts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because White Diamond is not technically it's not the mother. It's they're all sisters. So, she's like the big sister, but it's like, it's his aunts. So, and the fact that I thought this was interesting, right? Is the fact that the two, Yellow and Blue, missed Rose, or sorry, Pink Diamond. They loved her, and they felt like she was gone, and that they were dead. And as we go into like understanding their relationship, it seems like she's the little sister. They treated her very much like they love her in a way where it's like, but it was like in a very, very oppressive way. And that's why she escapes.
Yeah, like we don't take you seriously.
Yeah. And if you step out of line, we'll just put you in your room for X amount of years.
Yeah, put you in your room, yes.
Yeah, so it's like, so I thought it was fascinating that the resolution was to talk to your family, to talk to this family, and to bring up the fact that that what they're feeling is actually this. They're feeling this grief that they are not dealing with. And them accepting the fact that, hey, yeah, like that is true. I have been all this stuff, I've done it because I have this grief, right? This doesn't justify it, because the show is very clear that all their actions are still their actions, and also like very clearly is not the villains technically don't get redeemed. The relationship is what gets redeemed. Mm-hmm. Because of the relationship, they begin to change as people, but the relationship is what's redeemed. And again, a lot of people hated the show afterwards because, like, how do they like because of what you just said? Because people don't want to do that. People don't want to. The people that grew up with watching it were confused because they were like, I don't want to reconcile with my family who hurt me, who did all this stuff. Like, I don't want to do that. So it's like a lot of people were arguing about that, but it's like, I thought that it was fascinating, and with the White Diamond stuff, it was really smart for it to be about what we were mentioning of trying to find the fact of, like, she sees herself as this perfect entity, like the Pharisees saw themselves as perfect, because they were following the law. So she believed that if everybody followed the structure that she made, everything was good and everything was well and everybody was good and she was perfect and everything was perfect. And that what Stephen presents is going like, no, you are all flawed. I am flawed. We're all flawed as individuals. So, like, you are wrong. and for her to realize that she is, like, feeling this emotion, feeling like she was wrong about something because she strongly believed that Pink Diamond was pretending to be Steven. And to have that shatter, to have that idea shattered, meant that she was wrong about something, meant that she wasn't perfect. Therefore, her whole ideology is wrong. Therefore, she stops being the bad guy because the whole belief system that she had fell apart. She's not. She doesn't stop being bad. It's just that she gets like presented with the realization that she's not perfect.
Yeah,
Therefore,
like this whole time she thought Pink was the problem. She's blaming the problem on Pink. She's blaming the problem on Pink's emotions and her humanness in that sense. And then she realizes, oh no, Pink's not the problem. I'm the problem. Whoops.
So when Change Your Mind, when that song comes along, and it says what you just said, Joseph, of like reaffirming the fact of like, I am going to it has to come from me. Like, what did you say? Sorry, like you said it very specifically
on your terms.
Reconciliation can happen, but it always has to be on my terms.
Yes. So that song, like, is that like literally that's what that song is saying, and I thought that was completely, that's not what I saw. Like, that's not what I saw.
You're importing a rich Christian theology which says the start of reconciliation is the recognition that we're all flawed. Is the reconciliation that we all, none of us have. None of us. I mean, there's relative levels of moral high ground. Mother Teresa is slightly higher than Hitler. But is a common basis of humility that we all need that none of us is the God that everyone has to bow down to us. But within the show, in practice, again, there's reconciliation, but it's always on Stephen's terms. And again, what do these people become? The ants become, they kind of become groveling sycophants for him, throughout the rest of the show. There isn't the power dynamic of, Steve, everybody reconciles on Stephen's terms. Again, and it gets, it's at once when it's, space Nazis, and I say that with, I say that in jest, but, it's one thing. But when it's, the crotchety, grandpa who flies around, it's like, okay, he's also only gets to reconcile when he accepts it on Stephen's terms. Aspect of the show, the reconciliation only happened the show. If your moral imagination is being primarily written by this, you don't have a language with which to say, maybe sometimes reconciliation has to happen because I'm in the wrong. Maybe reconciliation sometimes has to happen in a more balanced way. Maybe we're going to have to agree to disagree, but still have a relationship with each other. That's something that doesn't exist within the confines of this universe. And I think one of the things we're kind of talking about here is that, far too many people grew up with, people talk about the thing of Disney adults. It's like, great, Disney's great when you're kids. It's like, you need to read other things and watch other things when you get an adult. And far too many people stopped with Steven Universe. And I think a lot of the break that you're describing, it sounds like happened partly because they couldn't reconcile the different aspects of what the show was saying. Yes. Nathan, again, you were telling to me, about the memes that have gone along with where Steven says like meets Hitler and says like, hey, like let's learn to love each other. And people say no, this guy's we're gonna have to kill this guy, Steven. And Steven's like, oh man, because that's what happens. And not to get dark here, but when you run into a villain that can't be redeemed, and that's the only language that you know is on your terms, and you start to say, oh, your crazy uncle is the same as this. I was writing about the problems with the TV show Andor, where it's really difficult where they kind of tried to reconcile the space fantasy of Star Wars, where it's the Jedi versus the Sith, and it's the Rebels versus the Empire, but then actually tried to bring in like modern American politics into like it, and it's like, wait, are you saying that like these cops are actually Nazi stormtroopers and that we should shoot them? Because that's the story that you're kind of like doing here by conflating these things, and I think that's again, it's like the problem again is not so much Steven Universe, but the fact that its imagination is narrow enough and people were using that as their baseline story without a supplemental story for what reconciliation means and can look like.
I think that's why I think that the rest of the show to me fixes it. Like the movie and future to me at least, it fixes that song at the end. It fixes that, like you said, that thesis statement at the end of like, I actually don't agree with that last part. Like, what are you talking about? Because that's not what I saw. It's like, what? Wait, hold on. What? Wait. So I've always had that problem with that last scene because I'm like, wait, what? Like that's what? Like that song is so abrasive in a way where it really rubs me the wrong way. It's the only song when I sing a Steven Universe song, I feel this whale of emotions because they're beautiful. Like I think Rebecca Sugar has, and everybody who worked in the songs have this amazing talent of bringing in so much emotion into the songs. But that song at the end, that song felt bitter. That's why I like when I listened to that song to me felt like someone talking to God and not being okay with God. Saying, I don't want you to change me. Like, if you want me to change, you have to change first. And that's what that song felt to me at the end. And I've always had that thought in my head. And I think, Joseph, that the way you put it, like, finally, like, clicked to me of why I think that really rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like it kind of clashes with the message, like, because it's like there is two dual messages that are happening, I think, throughout the entire show, and that's what you're mentioning. I think they often crash with each other, and that happens in real life too, because Rebecca Sugar, like, even though the Crewniverse and Rebecca Sugar were writing a story that was beautiful and trying to find a way to tell these how to express his emotions to in a language, like you mentioned, like give it a language to people. She was also trying to push the representation in her show, and like that's what got the show canceled in the first place. Because, and the funny thing is that the person in charge of Cartoon Network back in when she was writing the show was a gay man. But he kept warning her that if she kept pushing these scenes on the show, the other countries that the show was being released in were not going to air the episodes. We're gonna because in other countries, like in Spanish, for example, Ruby, and I think it is, yeah. Like Ruby was referred to like as a he, basically. It was played by a guy, the voice.
Interesting.
And I don't think it is in Spanish. I think Spanish is they actually did translate it normally. I think it's in other countries where the show was translated. They translated it as a guy. Ruby was a guy, and that's why purposely in the episode when she learned about that in the episode of the wedding, she did two things. She made it part of the story, essentially part of the story that needed to be, because she wanted to focus one episode entirely on the wedding. But when she heard that was not gonna fly in the other countries, because in other countries they translated Ruby into a guy, like she was like I'm not okay with that. So she decided to put the wedding in front of a very important pivotal moment in the story, and also put Ruby in the dress and Starfire in the tuxedo. That's literally why that happened. Was to stick it to the people who translated in other countries the character as a guy, and that caused the episode not to air on other countries, and therefore the downfall of Steven Universe in that period of time. Of course, the fandom was so loud that it was able to come back, but as a movie and a miniseries, right? And now the environment is completely different to where we're getting finally a new show set in the universe of Steven Universe pretty soon. But that's because the world environment has changed a lot when it comes to those things. So yeah.
Well, so this is, I think, you talk about the bitterness. I think that you're right that there was a bitterness there, and I think that in that last song, "Change Your Mind," is, and I think that you say something else, which is that this is the ultimate poison of reconciliation always has to come on my terms, because it's bad enough when that we do that with our fellow man, but when we do that with God, that the only result of that is hell. And I don't mean that in the evangelical kind of here's the burning, if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you're going to go to the fiery furnace. Although, if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, the fiery furnace, that comes from a relationship with God. And then you pain and darkness is the only thing that you're going to have, because we need that relationship with God. And when we say, I will only have a relationship with you if it's done on my terms, that is not a relationship we are going to have, because ultimately we have to have a relationship with God on his terms. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of people who say that, you can be a gay affirming Christian or whatever, stuff like that. But for a lot of people in the LGBTQ community, what they hear as the loudest voice in their own hearts and from the society at large is that you can't have that. And that there are terms that God is setting that the most important part of my identity God doesn't approve of. And this is something Dr. Jean Twenge said. She's a sociologist. She talked about this. The reason that millennials and Gen Z are leaving church is because church says that you don't get to determine your own identity. God does. And the church, doctrine does. And ultimately, I think that is because that's at the heart of Steven Universe, one of its conflicting problems. That is probably the thing that is the most damaging, if you accept it as a part of it, is, no, God, if you disapprove of this part of my life, you're wrong. I'm not. And as a human being, whether it's your sexuality, whether it's your race, whether it's your masculinity, or whether it's your femininity, whether it's your gender identity, whatever it is, it's got to be on God's terms and not yours. And I think that, the showrunner of this show, fundamentally, she doesn't believe that. Mm-hmm. And the fact that God won't meet her on her terms, I think probably is a source of bitterness for her, even though she's so close to God in other ways, as we discussed.
And that's the frustrating tension right there. So close, but but she lets herself be. Well, so
there's a scene, I'm going to say, in Paradise Lost. John Milton wrote Lucifer's line, and this is you've heard me talk about this. It's my favorite lines in all of literature, where Lucifer says, because he's been cast out of heaven and he's gone to hell, and now he's seeing the glory of God again in Eden. And it reminds him of what he's saying. And he falls down on his knees and weeps. And he says, even now I would go back if I could go on my feet and not on my knees. And the problem is, saying you're wrong always means going back on your knees. So anyway, you got very excited. You were going to talk, so I'm going to shut up now. Right?
No, I think you're definitely right. And that's why it's so conflicting what Nathan just said. It's the fact of that's why we stated originally in the first podcast we did, this is the most Christian, non-Christian show ever made.
Yes.
Because there's a dual message being portrayed here in this show. And that's why there's such a divide in the fandom, because the messages crash with each other. With people who were raised in a more stable home where they were presented Christian ideals, the show actually fits very well and actually has helped a lot of people deal with their emotions. Mm-hmm. And let's say that also other homes that have very, very good, stable homes that are not Christian.
A positive structure.
Exactly. They have a good structure of morality and what it means to be a ethical person, right?
A healthy, fully formed human with other humans.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's why there's this huge divide in this fan base, is because of that, because there is this clashing dual message that is being spoken of, because there is this redemption and wanting to redeem others, wanting to heal, and it's a very Christian message. And then there's this other side of, you have to accept me as I am, or you are not good like me, right? You're not good. And it crashes. It just clashes because it makes no sense with your other statement. If you are saying that redemption and goodness and being kind to others is important to be a good person, and then saying that person needs to completely accept who you are before you're able to be kind to them, that makes no sense. It just doesn't make sense.
Because in order to love you, it's my own choice. I don't need you to change your mind or do anything about yourself in order for me to love you. The same way Christ died for us when we were still enemies to him. It was all about your own personal choices, not about what the other person says or thinks about you. It's about what you decide to do out of love.
I think it's
ironically, it's being more like White Diamond because it's demanding a conformity to you before relationship is possible.
Yes.
That's why it's so fascinating to me with writers like this, right? Where writers that have these ideals, that were taught these ideals, you can see them in their stories, but then their own ideals crash with those ideals, and it's you can see the conflict that they have in their own heads about the dual ideals that they carry, and you can see it throughout. You can see a lot of people like this throughout their art, throughout their music. People who were kind of raised in this with these Christian ideals, and then diverge from them. And they always are clashing with those two things because it doesn't mix with each other. But at the same time, they see in their hearts, they know that there's something right about this, right?
Well, and that's the thing, is that you have some of the best art comes from the tension of, I don't know how to reconcile these, but I'm working through it. But when you rush a finale, you get this thing where it's like, I want to force the thing that I want to say in there and force the square peg into the round hole in a way that artificially dissolves the tension that's there, not very honestly.
And a finale that was rushed as a result of you trying to force things in that just could not quite fit to begin with.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting because Rebecca Sugar has mentioned that Steven is named after her brother. And the song at the end, Love Like You, is her singing to her brother. And you can reconceptualize the song as either Rose singing to Steven, or Rose singing to Greg. Both those are good interpretations to me. But Love Like You is a song from Rebecca to her brother, because she finds that her brother is a better person than her. And she has described her brother as as a person she looks up to. And I find that very interesting, and I wish I could know more about her brother, but I couldn't find anything about him. So it's really hard to but that is really interesting to me, that she based this character specifically on someone she finds as an ideal person. So yeah, that is a fascinating thing.
So now the movie.
Oh, yes. Right. All right, here. I'll read what I wrote down. Oh, hold on, that's future. Here's the movie. It's Happily Ever After. 2 years after the main series, Steven has finally brought peace to the galaxy. The Earth is safe, his friends are happy, and under his personal guidance, Homeworld has undone much of the damage it has done over millennia. However, just when Steven hoped things would stay like this forever, the Earth is invaded by Spinel, a playmate of Pink Diamond's that was cruelly abandoned by her long ago. Spinel has come to get revenge on Pink's son and her other friends, and she does so by poisoning the Earth, nerfing Steven's powers, and erasing the Crystal Gem's memories. It's quite the struggle for Steven, but he's eventually able to restore both himself and his friends by relearning the power of friendship, love, independence, truth, and most of all, change. Core facets of all their identities. Along the way, Steven discovers the true depths of Spinel's despair over Pink drifting away from her, and he does his best to help her come to grips with it. After a violent confrontation, Spinel finally feels remorse for what she's done, but is unsure what to do next, having caused so much trouble for Steven and his friends. Fortunately, the Diamonds arrive, and sensing a kinship in her, gladly take Spinel in so they all finally have someone to adore and be adored by. By the end of the movie, Steven's happily ever after is understanding that concept doesn't actually exist. There's always more work to be done, whether it be working alongside others or working on ourselves, and that's a good thing.
This changes things for me. For me, when I saw this movie, I was like, this shifts things from he's the Messiah to, oh, he's more like a Christian figure to me. He feels more like a Christian, and it also what you were talking about, Joseph, of actually presenting us with an actual struggle of trying to change as a person, and Steven goes through that and realizes that it's very interesting, because it is meant to be like this reintroduction to people who don't know about Steven Universe as well, to the universe of Steven Universe, because I think that at this point they got picked up for Future, and they were planning on Future, and the movie was popular enough for them to get picked up for Future. So there is this proof of concept of what the show is going to be now, and you can clearly see the perspective changing of what we're gonna do now. And it follows still very well with the original show, because I think it deals once again, it presents us with I think the most heinous thing that Rose has done, besides starting a war, which is forgetting about Spinel and this planet for thousands of years. That's crazy. So but it presents it in a way where she truly forgot, because again, like Rebecca Shear said, that this one is based on like Spinel is based on like a toy that she left out in her garden when she was a kid, and it kind of just stayed there, and she like later on found it when she was like older, and she saw that like it kind of faded, and like but it was still there, like waiting for her, basically. So that's where like it comes from. She also made a song for Adventure Time with that same exact story, but it seems like it's something that really marked her like understanding of the world, of like there are things that stay right where you left them, basically. But they change over time. They degrade. So it's like this idea of like there are things that stay, but change over time. And you see that in Spinel, of like someone who was like very very much excited about everything, and then like begins to like corrupts once she finds out that she was like robbed of her friend, basically. And we see that in Spinel. I feel like I related so much. Not only I related so much to Spinel at this period in my life, because when this movie came out, I was in my 20s now. I believe so, and it really struck a chord with me, because when she sings
Drift Away?
When she sings Drift Away, you keep on turning pages for people who don't care about you, and still it takes you ages to see that no one's there, everyone's gone on without you. And that hit me like a freight train, because I am very thankful to God that right now I have people like Nathan in my life and other friends that I've had.
Friends, sorry.
Yeah. But like I have friends that really care about me. I didn't have that in the past. I grew up. There were people that were there that were nice to me, and they were good. But they always they never stayed, and and the reason why is because I moved. Like I mentioned, I was a missioner's kid. I grew up with a family in Panama. That was my family. Like the people I met there, that was my family. And we moved back to Puerto Rico, and I had to leave everyone behind. And at that point, there were still no like smartphones were not very popular. They were not like I mean, they were in the United States, but not in Panama. It was like a starting technology, and even now it's not the best. But I lost contact with everybody, and it felt like that. It felt isolating. It felt lonely, and I couldn't control. It was out of my control because I was still a minor. Like we had to move. We moved, and that was devastating because I felt alone in a new space, in a new place where nobody seemed to care about me and nobody knew me. So I had to rebuild everything, every social thing, and I couldn't find anyone who wanted to be around me or who cared about me. So that song really, like Spinell's story, really spoke to me in that period of time, and really like made me realize about all those feelings I was having. So again, like just continuing the trend of Steven Universe providing a way for me to like see those feelings in something else and recognizing them in me as well. Because again, growing up with ADHD and autism, I didn't know I had those feelings. Like I truly didn't understand my feelings, and watching these characters go through those things and express those emotions making me understand what I was feeling inside, why like these feelings that I was feeling inside, and yeah, it was a beautiful that movie was incredible to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talking about how much the show reflects this generation. I think a lot of people probably related a lot to Spinell in the same way you were saying that. I think a lot of people out there desperately have that craving to want to be loved, but at the same time, on a visceral level, feel so deeply unloved by the people around them. So they feel so viscerally alone by the people that they had once trusted, by the people they once relied on, including even family members that they once trusted. And so there's, again, that whole tension, that whole disconnect of these people that I once knew and trusted and thought I could rely on don't actually love me the way I thought they would, because it won't. Maybe because they're straight up abusive, maybe because they won't love me on my own terms, or whatever have you. But for whatever reason, they don't feel loved the way they did anymore. And so here comes Spinell, showing up as all representing all those feelings that I'm sure a lot of people of this generation have felt around this time.
Joseph,
I remember. Again, this is actually really recent that I watched, and I think it's one of the best things that Steven Universe has done. The movie. Yeah. I think if we were to pick like top 10 favorite episodes of Steven and treat this as an episode, I would say it's easily one of the best. And certainly to me, it has one of the best songs. Spinell's introduction song about the other side, the loser of the game that you didn't know you were playing.
Yeah, that's really good.
Devastated me because, growing up as a homeschool kid and then going to the city to make a name for myself, to build community and build kind of my dream career, and being very sensitive to rejection in an interpersonal sense, but also a kind of status sense, to say, oh, these people I desire to like and like me and who I respect really could care less. And you can see because, when, I make plans, they're busy, but I see them on their Instagrams, with other people. And the thing is, the winners of that game, the people that they were friends with, the people that they dated, didn't always even know that I thought of myself as another option. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm the loser of the game that you didn't even know you were playing. After 5 seasons of Steven Universe, they would be not able to find more deep wells of human emotion to break our hearts. But Spinell, clearly they did. One of the greatest villain characters they created on the show, they did there. But the other thing that struck me is the arc that they gave Steven and the Crystal Gems. Because, again, very smart, very perceptive things to be able to say. Because I remember one of my professors, essentially, and I'm vastly paraphrasing because he was doing a course called American Political Thought and Practice, and Steven Universe is not. But it's the understanding that your happy ending, your ideal world, always comes at the expense of someone else.
Yes.
Because your happy ending world is on your terms. And,
yes.
And that doesn't fit other people. Like, is peace better than war? It's like, well, it depends on whose peace you're talking about. For the United States after World War II, peace was pretty good, but not for all the other people that were in places that were under deep oppression and horror. They might They wanted a little bit of war so that they could have a better piece of the pie. And so I think one of the things that this show so astutely and viscerally understood was, wanted, and having the villain say that your happy ending came at my expense, and having Steven Universe have to reckon with that on a deep level was so incredibly profound. And then ask, and then kind of, again, I was like, wait, they're regressing here. Are they doing the anime thing where are they actually doing this to make a point about the need for growth? I was like, oh, thank God, they're doing the latter. Now, again, I think you see here the thinness to some degree of the imagination of of the Steven Universe world, because what happens at the end, still, they just fold her back into Steven's ideal world being the way he wants it to be. There isn't a thing of like, oh, maybe there's something about my ideal world I have to change for the sake of this other person who my world doesn't fit. How do I need to sacrifice, in a sense, my ideal world for the sake of somebody else? That's something that doesn't quite enter into the imagination as part of the solution. Because he gets to kind of be like, he's kind of like, okay, I'm going to shuffle her off to this other place where she's fine. And then I kind of go back to, and I pay lip service to the fact that I'm going to have to change. But it does go back to his happily ever after thing at the end. Again, in principle, they really get it right. But in terms of like fleshing that out in practice, it's thin. And so that's my one criticism, an example of some of the things we've been talking about before, that's still present within this.
And that's why, to me, this movie is a bridge to fix that.
It's a pilot with Future.
With Future, that, I think, to me at least, that issue, that problem I had with that song, Change Your Mind, to me gets fixed. Because it, like you just said, Joseph, this movie basically says, no, you were wrong about that. Right? You were wrong. And again, like you said, it kind of folds back into the normality again. But then Steven Universe Future kind of like disrupts it. And like, but that's what I love about it. But it's like, I think that I do love the fact, though, that it is implied that Spinell cannot be part of the Steven world. Because at the end of the day, like, she caused pain, they caused pain. Because the fascinating thing to me is that Pearl knew about her. So that means that she also forgot. And that's there's an accountability there that essentially that of course it doesn't, I don't think it gets addressed very well, but Steven does kind of like apologizes for his mother's actions and all this stuff, but still their worlds can't interact because the pain that they caused, the mutual pain that they caused, was too much for them to be genuine friends, to become family.
Yeah.
And that's why like Spinell like gets sent off basically, because I think
that, yeah.
And that's why like and with Steven, you also see here that Steven also does not, and you can see it here in Future, that he does not have the connection with the Diamonds either, because they although they have accepted him as Steven, they have still done like horrible things, and he can't reconcile those feelings completely yet within him. And I feel like that's so much more profound because you're showing the cracks in the character of Stephen himself. Because although he preached goodness and reconciliation and wanting to show mercy and kindness, he can't get himself to show kindness, mercy, and goodness to his family because he still feels the pain of what they did to him. And
they're clearly not in the inner circle.
Exactly. So I find that very very much a deconstruction of the ideas that we brought that we brought up in the first show. Also confirms again the allegory of him being like this Messiah figure at the beginning. Stephen, everyone believes in. That's a really Christian song. Everyone believes in Stephen all across the universe. Ever compassionate, can you imagine it? Even with us at our worst. Hybrid son of a diamond, human son of a rose. What a revelation! He's a revolution, a gem that learns and grows. That's that's a hymn. That's literally a hymn. So it's like
no, it's absolutely a hymn. Yes.
That again, somebody who does not see
so that's
the
I
parallels.
want to get to talking about it, just lack of media literacy. Yes. So any thoughts you have, Nathan, before we move into the final Steven universe of the future?
Yeah, let's get to the future. All right, hold on. Sure. Here we are in the future. Set 2 years after the adventurous show, Stephen, now 16 years old, has worked tirelessly to finally bring Era 3 to the galaxy, dismantling the Diamond Authority and offering a new peaceful way of living to gems everywhere. We see that Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl have all made great strides and find themselves and live outside of Roach's shadow. And we see that many of Stephen's friends are also blooming into fulfilled, responsible adults, prompting some of them to even leave Beat Sieg behind to explore new pursuits. Now that all of his work is paid off and his friends are truly happy, you think Stephen would be more satisfied with himself, but we quickly learn that isn't the case. In this 20-episode miniseries, it explores the inner complexity and turmoil of Stephen, who, up until now, is ironically the only person that hasn't been given much time to unpack his emotional damage. Stephen's insecurities begin to flare up as he sees his loved ones develop themselves without him, and the resentment and self-hatred flooding his mind make him believe that he's worthless if he doesn't have a project to fix or a person to help. As Stephen struggles to conceal rather than feel these emotions, they begin to show in explosive ways that even he can't hide, primarily through his new and enhanced powers, which are obviously tied to his emotional state. Stephen does his best to channel and control these new powers, while also finding new outlets to constructively channel his growing dark feelings, but it's an uphill battle, especially as it dawns on him just how much unpacked trauma has been stored in his body and mind. Stephen learned some important lessons over the course of his emotional journey, thanks to his solid support of all of his loved ones, but he still winds up lashing out, overwhelmed by these dark feelings he hates having. In the worst case, he even shattered, i.e. killed, Jasper while learning to control his powers. He managed to heal her, but the guilt and damage done to his mind reached a tipping point. Unable to fix himself and unable to do the supposedly one thing he's good at, helping people, Stephen began to see himself as a reprehensible monster, and due to the psychological nature of his powers, he transformed into one, going on a rampage. In the climax of the miniseries, Stephen's loved ones stepped up to show Stephen the unwavering love and acceptance he showed to each of them, letting Stephen know that he's just as beloved as everyone else and doesn't need to shoulder all his burdens alone. After a mass, heartfelt embrace, Stephen returns to normal, having finally learned to receive love after spending so much time giving it. In the finale, Stephen shares a heartfelt goodbye with the crystal gems as he goes off on a road trip to find himself, promising to visit and meet all of his friends along the way.
Steven Universe Future is fascinating to me because now I am in my 20s. When this comes out, I'm in my 20s. I think I was like, what year does this come out?
I forget. Hold on. Give me a second.
Yeah. But during
also,
this
I just
time,
have to say, you guys, you drinking the water, Nathan, and just I'm seeing like you drinking space and moonbeams because it's not showing up on your Zoom call.
Oh, I never told you I drink moonbeams.
Yes.
It came out in 2019.
2019.
Oh, just before the world turned upside down.
Exactly. So this show was coming out. I think it was at the end of 2019. It started coming out.
Yeah,
because I remember because it started because the show kept coming out in the pandemic, like during lockdown, and I was in a very interesting space because I was alone. Well, not alone really, but I was I was alone in the United States because I went to live there for my studies and all that stuff. And I was alone, so in the pandemic, I decided to go and move into my aunt and uncle's home for a bit, so I wouldn't be alone. But most of my time, I did spend close in the room in a room during the pandemic. I felt so isolated and lonely, and I think everybody did. But I think what's fascinating to me is that a lot of people, including myself, did use that time for a lot of self-reflection because there was nothing else to do. So imagine the surprise, or imagine my emotional state when Steven Universe Future was coming out, and how it affected me in very different ways. Because you watched Joseph, so you understand that maybe like that experience should not be had while you're in quarantine. But I think it was good. I think it was perfect, and it was good for me because. And by the way, Nathan, you forgot to say that Steven also almost killed his father. I thought that was important to say. Anyway,
who of us hasn't?
Yeah, but I think that when that episode, I'm a people pleaser. I've been fighting against that for now. I'm trying to get better at it. But the environment I grew up in, which you've heard me describe it for my entire life, right, created in me a sense of needing to validate everyone else except for myself, not acknowledging myself, how I felt. And that's why I'm saying I relate a lot to Steven, because Steven had to carry the emotions of every single person around him, yet he didn't express anything himself. That's how I felt. I carried so many people's burdens for so long, like my families, my friends. Like, I have been the confidant of many people in my life. For some reason, I have that face where people go like, I'll tell you all my issues, my problems, and my life issues, and I say, hey, like, I think it's something that God has given in my life to help other people. That's great, but I did not.
Gosh darn it, Ray! That was one time.
but I think that when I watched the episode, and I forget the name, but it's specifically the episode where Steven goes to the hospital, and is after Connie like rejects him from like the marriage and all that stuff that he proposed.
Not just marriage, but living together as literally the same person for the rest of their lives.
Well, that's what marriage is, Nathan.
Yeah, but there's marriage as existing as two separate people versus marriage as sharing one literal consciousness.
I see no difference. Two shall become one flesh, Nathan.
Exactly. No, just joking.
Do you share your literal same profile?
Problems with this whatsoever.
Do you literally share your same Facebook profile with your spouse, or do you keep separate? Do you share the same bank account, or do you keep separate?
That is a really heartless thing to say to a single person, Nathan.
But okay, so When I watched that
Ray,
episode,
you were saying something really meaningful and depthful, and I apologize for Nathan.
oh no,
Now go.
Oh,
ahead.
sure.
no, but when that happened, and he goes to the hospital, he gets the brain scan, and she goes like, "What are all these cracks?" Oh, well, I have fought and all that stuff, and it's like, this looks like you have hurt yourself, and your brain and your bones have automatically healed themselves over and over. And she goes like, and he goes like, "Oh yeah, well, yeah, like gem stuff, you know?" And I'm like, and she goes like, "Yeah, but have you recovered? These things, they cause trauma, and if you haven't dealt with these things, your body is gonna react with anxiety. All this pent up emotions your body is gonna think that a little thing is the same thing as fighting these homeworld gems and all this stuff." And then Steven goes like, "Well, I guess I have experienced a lot of situations. I mean, my favorite ice cream brand just stopped producing, and then Earth got invaded, and then I watched Pearl die. I watched everyone die. Then and he just keeps listing all these things that he went through." And like the Connie's mom looks horrified, and he's like, and that moment, that flash of all those memories that show up in the show, I had to pause, because literally everything that has happened to me in the past crashed to me. Like, in that moment where Steven is reconceptualizing the events of his past, I also experienced the same thing. And it is the most, and I praised God for that, because he used Steven Universe, and this is my opinion. Whoever disagrees, it's okay. Yeah. But I think God uses different things to reach us. I really do. And I think this did, like, to me at least. Because the next thing I did was try to deal with those things with God. Right? Like, that was my next step. And like, that comes back with the tools that we have, Joseph, that you were speaking about, of like growing up in a specific kind of environment that gives you the tools to deal with things, right? So I had the tools to deal with it. I had it, while other people, I'm imagining, maybe didn't, but I did. And but the show was serving as a way to present these emotions, to present these ideas to me. And in that moment, for so long, I had a very particular experience growing up. 7th grade, two of my classmates grabbed me, and the third one sexually assaulted me. I still had my clothes and stuff like that, but he did. And I had always kind of just not thought about that. I was an innocence, I think, that was protecting me in a way, but at the same time, it was causing damage to not realize that those things were things that I hadn't dealt with and I had not processed. So that flashed in my head, and then all these other memories of people that hurt me, people I tried to help hurting me, emotionally or physically. Everything just, I'm like, and I cried and I cried, and again, that's why, like, this show is such a pivotal show for me, and like that's why I think a lot of people should watch it. I think adults should watch it. But yeah, like no, that was incredible. And then the whole portion of him feeling like a monster when Steven comes out of what he did to Jasper, and he comes out and he goes like, you all think I'm perfect, and you guys think I'm good, but you don't know who I really am. I tricked all of you. I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm a monster. I felt like that, and I started just like spiraling in this deep hole of like, have I hurt every single person I thought I helped? Did I actually hurt every single person I love? And I started like really thinking about it when Steven like goes to his dad, and he goes to the dad and like goes up and he shows him who his parents were. Basically, they go to his parents' house. And he talks about his parents as like controlling and all this stuff. And then Steven goes like, but like, I could have had a normal life, and you didn't give me that, right? And then like all of that, like I started thinking, wow, like there is an unappreciation from Greg to his parents for the good, because they did good things for him. You can see that he was like a good student, like he had a home, like he had a family, he had this like really good structure, but he felt like he couldn't be himself, and he made that entire thing his personality, and he escaped home and he left. And then Steven doesn't appreciate as well his father, because he wanted to have a more structured childhood. And his father genuinely, out of love, wanted his son to not have the structure that he felt made him sad and all this stuff. So it also like really recontextualized my relationship with my parents, and really made me think of the things my parents have done that I feel like they've hurt me for doing. They did it because they loved me, and that's the only way they could show their love. And I was lashing out at them because I thought that they didn't accept me or care about me the way I was, and therefore I couldn't have a relationship with them, that they were toxic. But Steven Universe Future made me realize that I was wrong about that. That my parents were just trying to do their best, and they did give me good things. So I also felt like a monster for hurting their feelings. And then I realized, hey, every single interaction I have with people, they misunderstand that. And if that person misunderstands my actions, then I misunderstand their actions. We are all fighting because we're stupid. we just don't recognize that we are all coming from a place, well, not every single person in the world, but we are all coming from a place of genuinely wanting to help each other, and we are misinterpreting that with our own biases and recontextualizing it to our own worldview. And the fact that we think ourselves as monsters, that we think of ourselves as bad and evil, there is a a biblical truth of sin in our lives, that we are sinful creatures, but at the same time, you can't, that can't guide you to then, because then you're driven by emotion. And what Steven goes through this entire season is that he's completely driven by his emotions, causing destruction, damage, pain to every single person that he loved. But what people that love you really do, and it's what really spoke to me about the end of Steven Universe Future, what people that really love you do when they see you like that, when they see you struggling, when they see you in that pain, when they see all those imperfections. They know that the imperfections that you are like diving deep in yourself about, they see them and they still choose to love you. And to me, that really spoke to me, and it really brought me to tears again. And it's there's something interesting about that. The parallels of my entire experience from teenager to my 20s, and that's what Steven Universe is for me, basically.
Checks out. I think at the end of the day, the future it gives Steven Universe the emotional story arc that the show would give everyone else back in the main show. I feel like all the other characters, when they had their emotional growth, it took 10 to 20 episodes. So Future is finally giving Steven that emotional story arc that he never really got. And I think in his story arc, it really just goes to show what you do when you don't know yourself. And when you don't know yourself, you're scrambling to find any and all ways to fill that blank in, because you can't exist without in that vacuum of not having identity. And Steven is so desperately trying to find that identity that he's willing to do anything to find that identity, whether it be default to, I had to go back to fix everyone, or if that's not working out, I guess I'll find someone else to fill in my identity for me, trying to quote unquote marry Connie and exist inside her to the point that I'm not existing as my own being as one with her. I'm just existing as inside of her in order to complete my own building, which is not marriage in that case. It's just trying to fulfill yourself in someone else, which is also not great. So he or even outside that, he's going to fill his identity negatively with all these false assumptions about himself, thinking that he's a monster and thinking that he's a bad person, thinking all of this because, again, he desperately needs something to fill that gap in because he just can't handle that gap. And he just filled it in with the worst possible example he could think of. And I think that's kind of what happens when you go around with lack of understanding of yourself, where not only are other people misunderstanding you, you are misunderstanding yourself in the process and assuming the worst about yourself, much like Steven and much like all of the self-hatred and resentment that you saw. And I think that's why it's so important to take some time to learn about yourself, because I think in the process, not only do you learn more about yourself in your process, but to your point, Ray, you start to understand other people more and understand how we all are prone to misunderstand each other as a result. To give a personal example, I learned so much myself through all the counseling and therapy I've done over the years. And in that process, as I've learned about myself, in comparison, I learned so much more about my parents, as seeing the comparison contrast between me and my parents, and realize, this thing that I assumed was I took in this bad faith interpretation I always assumed about my parents, about me, I realized was just a misunderstanding. And like you were saying, they were just trying to love me as best they can in this certain way. It's just, I never really took a step back to realize that about them until I took a step back and realized this about myself and seeing the similarities and differences between us. So it's it really just comes from taking a step to know what it is about yourself that's really you, and understanding that identity, which gives you more grace to not only accept yourself, but other people's identities as well, and realizing all these missteps that we can have in communication along the way.
Yeah,
Joseph, what are your thoughts?
I really thought, Ray, you hit on, to me, what were the best 2 episodes of the season, because the season to me is, I would joke with Nathan, this is Steven's mental breakdown, the series. And it's, and which is so rare, again, for a cartoon. Typically cartoons that are like sequel series are, let's pick up where we left off, or like let's pick up many years later and show what are the ways the characters have grown, what's the new place that they're in. And they start Stephen off with that. It's like, oh, now he's a teacher at this new school. And so, okay, here's how Stephen has grown. He's more a part of the community and his role has changed. But the series really is about the slow unraveling of Stephen, because he hasn't actually dealt with things that he needs to deal with. And I think that this is a really brave thing that the show did, because like you said, it became something for people who grew up with Stephen, who hadn't dealt with their own stuff, to give them space to deal with the things they hadn't dealt with. And one of the things I'm so impressed with about the show is the 2 episodes that you talked about. I remember this is another thing where, with Steven Universe, I said to Nathan years ago, much earlier in the series, I said to Nathan, this is traumatic for a child. A child shouldn't be going through this. And Nathan said, oh, buddy, you need to see Steven in the future. And so there's many ways I've been waiting for this season for a very long time, because I also went through many of the things in this season that Stephen went through. I went through the stuff with his dad where it's like, oh, man, I kind of wish certain ways that you had raised me, that you were so proud of the way you raised me because you weren't going to raise me the way your parents did. I kind of wish some of those you didn't raise me that way. But also growing to understand the context of why they did and saying, honestly, though, the way you were raised in many cases, or the thing you were trying to avoid me having, would have been worse. And again, that understanding and that empathy for the father, who a loser who hasn't really helped Stephen in the way he needs to be helped, which again, like I said, isn't the perspective that they put forth in the original show, because it's an idealized part of the childhood. But when Stephen is like, look at all the tools I don't have, the part where he is in the skating rink with Connie and her friends, again, as a homeschool kid, being like, I don't know how to interact with other people who seem to know everything that I don't know. That I felt that, very deeply. But then I've also had the experience of, telling someone casually who didn't know my, life or my family story or anything about things that have happened in my life, and watch their jaws drop to the floor and say, Joseph, you went through that? Are you okay? And not realizing, oh, is this something to not feel okay about? And is it okay for me to say and allow myself to say to myself that I'm not okay? I've had friends, I think it was even in the last several months, who I casually mentioned, the death of my father. And they actually pressed me on that and said, like, how are you feeling about that? And I gave this sort of casual answer I typically do. But they really pressed in and said, allow me, like, tell me about the things that you're sad about with it. And I didn't. I found myself crying. And it was a moment of permission to feel those things.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, if I was to put a top 10 list of best TV Universe episodes, certainly the hospital episode would be in there, because that moment of giving permission to yourself to say, oh, terrible things happen to me, in my relationships, in my family, and whatever it is for you. That, I think, was amazingly beautifully done, and I felt such power in that moment and such resonance with it for me.
Yeah, I think people underestimate just how much grieving is a big step towards self-discovery and healing. I mean, blessed are those who grieve, for they will be healed. They will be comforted. Like, it's a very important step, but we just often let it go to the wayside or forget about it because we're often scared to face those feelings, or we're just conditioned that it's not helpful to face those feelings.
Yeah. I mean, like, coming from a space of, like, my parents are very different now. But a lot of our parents were not giving the tools to deal with complicated emotions, and they still carry them until today. And I can see that. Like, I can see it now when they're older and when they're still like, and they randomly give you like lore bits of their past, and you're like, oh my gosh, are you like like, and you can see it that they're not okay because it hurts. And knowing that now, like, really, like, realizing that about my father, I find myself impressed in many ways.
Yeah.
Because he was able to make me feel loved.
Yeah.
And even though he was going through that, and that's why like, when you change your mind, that song and that finale doesn't work for me, but this does.
Yeah.
Like, Future and the movie do, because they fix it. Because they fix it a lot, because it's more human, and it's actually following more with the thematics of the original thematics of the series, and it doesn't have that much of a clash, because it doesn't feel like it needs to prove itself anymore, because there's no, the social aspect of what Rebecca Sugar was trying to do with the show, it's normalized now. Nobody cares. Like, so she focused on what the show was actually trying to do originally, was presenting this way to cope with these emotions that we all have, and or parallelly to what she was trying to do in the original. So I find myself loving my parents even more, because I have felt hurt by them. I have, in many ways. But the fact that they also were hurt in ways that I can't even fathom, and they still were able to give me what they gave me, that's enough for me. Like, I don't need them to prove anything, right? Like, I don't need them to change for me. They are who they are, and they still love me, even though I am who I am. And that's it. Like, and that's how I see God. And like, one of the songs that touched me from the movie was, that I forgot to mention, was No Matter What, because that really spoke to me about my relationship with God and Jesus, right? Like, no matter what. And every time I sing it, I just picture that, because I have been blessed that I've had that God has blessed me with parents that love me. And even though in the moments I thought they didn't, they still loved me. And I know that a lot of people don't have that. I know that people have had parents that have kicked them out of their homes, and that's not okay. I was afraid about a lot of things to tell my parents that I was going through, but when I did, they were understanding, and I thought, like, that would never happen. And I was misunderstanding them. So, if anything, I leave you with that. I think that for me is the fact that when Jesus brought this message to us that we need to essentially understand that we are all broken, and the way to find ourselves is through a reconciliation of a relationship between us and the Father.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we eventually are able to find ourselves within Christ. And there is a beauty in that, because God is going to put people in your life, as you do, that are going to fill those spaces where you feel lonely or lost or sad. And I have had that experience, and it takes time, but when you are able to find yourself with Him, when you're able to find who you are, you start getting out of the way of the relationships that you have, and you start building bridges, and you start making better relationships from that point on.
Yeah, that's kind of the beautiful irony, especially if you're coming at life with this whole people-pleasing perspective. Because like you were saying earlier, it's easy to go into this mindset of, oh, well, I can't make space for myself. I can't take time for myself. I need to focus on solving other people's problems. I'm more helpful and kind to them if I focus more on them as opposed to focusing on myself. But what God does is when we take time to slow down with Him, take time to let Him into our hearts and really see the identity that He has for us and accept that identity, we wind up making that space for us. And ironically, by making that space and facing that pain and allowing Him to fix that pain from inside out, we were able to have so much more empathy for other people, and we're able to make up so much more space for other people in this process. So it's like going from inside out winds up just making so much more space on the outside and so many more bridges you can connect with other people. But it's again like a heart issue. It has to begin from the inside, which again, what so much of Jesus' testimony was all about, was addressing the matters on the inside of the heart. And because if you don't have that, you're nothing but a whitewashed tomb that is very set in their ways and very rigid, like the Pharisees. So it's really just about letting God help you face what's going on in there, making space for Him, and through the process, you're able to make space for yourself and everyone else around you. And He uses those people around you to help learn how to do that even more.
Yeah, I think if there's anything that this conversation has left me with, it's that Steven Universe works best for people who have the context of the Christian story.
Yes.
Because one of the things I do worry about with the finale of Steven in the future is that it is a deconstruction story. It's not a reconstruction from the deconstruction story. And we do live in a time where a lot of people are trying to fix their problems by going on a road trip in the way that Steven ends the show. Where it's like, okay, I'm going to go off and find myself by myself, visiting my friends and seeing them, but not being bound inwardly tight-knit as a community, not having meaningful work that binds me together. And that part of their journey never ends because they keep thinking that finding yourself period as an individual is going to solve the problem. They've gone through the deconstruction aspect, but they haven't reconstructed anything. And I think, again, if the only story you have is Steven Universe, you don't have an imagination for what happens after Steven Universe goes on his road trip. But if you do have an idea of what it looks like to come back from that and to what happens when the road trip is over, I think, again, like what we've said, in this, what it does to help us feel the feelings we need to feel to begin that process is a really rare thing, whether it's Christian or non-Christian, in storytelling that we rarely get to see. And I think that's the value that it adds. But it's kind of like, I had interview with a culture critic called Freya India on the Overthinkers podcast, shameless plug, where she talked about the fact that what's interesting is that people talk about how social media has, caused all this depression and anxiety and everything like that. But one thing that people have noted is the fact that that isn't true everywhere where social media has been introduced. It's only in the places where meaning-making institutions and relationships have fallen apart, and the social media has become replacements for these things. Social media is a supplement for, church, for family, for work, community, all stuff like that. Then it doesn't cause these pathologies. And I think that the tragedy of the time we live in is that so many people are coming to Steven Universe as a substitute myth for the Christian myth, rather than as a supplement for it. And so what I would ask, for anybody who's listening to this show and is a fan of Steven Universe, and maybe you're not a Christian, and you've learned a lot from Steven Universe, one of the things that I would advise is let Steven Universe be an on-ramp to and a supplement to a larger story that tells you how to reconstruct what Steven Universe has helped you process and deconstruct through. And that's, I suppose, how I would where I would leave my final word on the Steven Universe retrospective. The most
Makes
Christian
sense.
show of the past 20 years.
Yeah, the most Christian, non-Christian show ever made. In my period of time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We have talked about the show for a long time, and we appreciate you listening to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you share it and like it or review it wherever platform you're in. And thank you so much, Joseph, once again for joining us. You were incredible. I was so excited to hear your perspective on this because I feel like you helped me process a lot of the negative feelings I have towards this series in a very helpful way, because you were not coming from it. You weren't attacking the show like other people have. So like sometimes when other people attack the show, I since it's such a big part of me, I try to over defend it. But since you were coming from a place of this show had a lot of good, but here's some things that I feel like it didn't bring. I have processed those also those feelings that I had about the show. That
see how having trusted friends and loved one help you process through your grief, people. It's exactly that.
Exactly. So yeah. So thank you very much, Joseph, for joining us. And any final words?
It's always a pleasure. We are the Crystal Gems. We can always save the day. And if you think we can't, we always find a way. No, I thank you so much for letting me, talk nerdy with you. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, I really hope that more conversations like this about good art can be had, and I hope that I'm really looking forward to what our kids make about us, and I hope it is even better than the stories we've told about ourselves and our parents.
Amen.
It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? It's over, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it over? Thank you so much for joining us, and see you on the next episode.
Wahoo.
That wasn't so bad. Barely over 7 hours, right?